716. Before Liu Shiliu left Luopa Mountain and went to the battlefield in Old Dragon City, the burly man who called himself Jun Qian went to Jise Peak's ancestral hall to offer incense and went to the first floor of Luopa Mountain's bamboo building. Except for a wooden bed in the corner, it looked more like a study room. The little butler, Nuan Shu, opened the door with a key. Ju Mili held a green bamboo cane and a golden pole. She was the door god. She stood straight with her chest out. Liu Shiliu flipped open some books that were neatly placed on the table. Most of the pages were densely packed with annotations written in small regular script. If it was true, then little junior brother should be a very serious scholar. After all, senior brother Kui Dong's collection of books were also like this. Every time he saw a different view from Kui Dong's, he would ask Xiaoqi to write for him. Usually, there would be dozens of fights in a book. Liu Shiliu put the book back and looked up slightly. He looked at a couplet hanging on the wall. It was blue with golden words and cloud and bat patterns. According to Xiaomi, little junior brother had picked her up from the North Continent. Outside the mountain, wind and rain is a 3-foot sword. Go down the mountain with the sword when you have something to do. Flowers and birds in the clouds, a house of books. Read without worry. Liu Shiliu looked boorish, but he was actually very careful. He noticed the words Chen 11 printed in the corner of the couplet. He was good at both civil and martial arts. He cultivated his strength and heart. Before Liu Shiliu returned to the mountain, he went to the young family's shop to guard the array for Dong Wanggong. Then, he went to the sky screen with Ruan Xiu to entertain guests. He got what he wanted. He crushed 2 enemies with his fists. 2 golden rain fell on the north peak of the first continent. Half of the golden body fragments were collected by the Longevity Fellow and the other half was given to Mount Biyun. Ruan Xiu, the little girl, was even more exaggerated. She went straight to the sky screen. Did she meet the Sage of Rites? After returning to the mountain, Liu Shiliu was secretly awarded the position of Mountain Patrol Envoy by the Right Guardian of Luopa Mountain. Xiaomi said that the position was not high and he should not despise it. When the man patrolled the mountain, he spread his arms horizontally. A little girl was hanging on each arm. One was in a pink dress and the other was in black. They walked together in the morning. Once, when he was patrolling the mountains, there was a little lotus figure sitting on his head, admiring the moonlight together. Heavenly Lord Qing Tong's reopening of the Ascension platform in the mortal world could be said to be an extremely profound blessing that fell from the sky to the numerous earth immortal cultivators of the continent. It was an ascension platform. It was a veritable ascension to an ancient ruin. In the end, there would be a dilapidated heavenly gate standing above the sea of clouds. During the process of Tiantai's ascension, it was a kind of tempering. So long as every earthly immortal cultivator stabilized their Tao heart and soul, they would be able to ascend to the top. Although they were destined to be unable to pass through the heavily guarded ancient door, being able to stand outside the cloud heaven door was already considered a success. Cultivators continued to fall from the ascension platform and return to the mortal world. The size of the harvest depended on the height of the ascension platform. 70 to 80% of them had great gains. Xu Han, the city lord of Qingfeng City, wore the swansea armor and stood on the ascension platform. His state of mind was as calm as a mountain. He finally broke through the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm and entered the upper 5 realms. Liu Baqiao, the sword cultivator of the Wind and Thunder Garden, was more unfortunate. Due to the flaw in his sword heart, he stopped at the nascent soul realm. In fact, he originally had a glimmer of opportunity to enter the Great Tao, but it was probably because of the inner demon that caused him to suffer serious injuries. After taking a big step forward, not only did he fail to take the second step, but he also retreated slightly. However, even if he only advanced from the Golden Core realm to the nascent soul realm, Liu Baqiao would still have a good explanation for his senior brother Huang He, who was about to give up his position as the Garden Lord. Otherwise, Liu Baqiao felt that given his senior brother's temper, he would be able to transfer the Garden Lord to someone else. Then, he would be grounded in the mountain for 100 years. If he did not cultivate to the nascent soul realm, he would not be able to leave the mountain. Liu Baqiao and Xu Han ascended to the top of the Sea of Clouds. Soon, they could not help but return to the mortal world. Liu Baqiao revisited the small town and went to the supervisor's office. He met Supervisor Cao for the first time and hit it off. They drank together. The golden core female deity of the Mount Yunxia, Cai Qinqian, was a rather surprising one. With her potential, the few grandmasters on the mountain did not think that she would be able to ascend to the nascent soul realm. However, this time, she clenched her teeth and persevered until the end. Although she only caught a glimpse of the divine gate, it was a great success. This time, Cai Qinqian could be considered to have reached the heavens in a single bound. If there were no accidents, when she returned to the sect this time, other than her previous position in the Hall of Grandmasters, she would also be the youngest female grandmaster in the history of the Mount Yunxia. There were many immortal mansions in the Aquarius continent. Usually, when a cultivator became a golden core cultivator, other than being able to establish a mountain and announce it to the entire continent, they could also be promoted by one generation in the mountain and river register. If they were lucky enough to ascend to the nascent soul realm, they would be one generation higher. As for the upper 5 realms, they could establish a sect there. After Cai Qinqian left the ascension platform, she came to an old school by herself. She looked at the empty school and no one knew what she was thinking. The black-clothed man Jiang Yun, as a disciple of the Jiang clan of the Cloud Forest, did not immediately head towards the East Sea battlefront where the Jiang clan of the Cloud Forest was overseeing to meet up with his master and Governor Wei Liang. Instead, he stopped for a while and made the same choice as Liu Baqiao and Cai Qinqian. He decided to visit the Pearl Grotto Heaven town of the past. However, when he went to the Iron Lock Well, he was a little disappointed. After he pulled out the iron chain that was hanging at the bottom of the well, he had already refined it into his natal item. It allowed him to successfully refine a small world in the human body into the long-lost Iron Mountain Forest and Crystal Clear Dojo. He also obtained an immortal treasure that could both attack and defend. This time, Jiang Yun had also ascended to the nascent soul realm. The other earth deities all had their own levels. Those who were lucky enough to see the ancient appearance of the Gate of Heaven were the minority. Among the earth deities that secretly rushed over, only 20 to 30% of them returned in disappointment. They did not obtain anything and quickly fell out of the ascension platform. However, they did not dare to reveal any weird expressions. The only compensation was that they did not break through here. The earth deities did not need to accumulate too many battle merits when they went to the battlefield at Old Dragon City. Sui Yuyu had just broken through the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm in the Book Lake True Realm sect. He was the Jindan earth deity with the least experience in this group. However, Sui Yuyu changed from a pure martial artist to a sword cultivator. It was already a strange thing for him to become a Jindan sword cultivator in just a dozen years. It was even more shocking. However, Jade Gui sect and True Realm sect, the two upper and lower sects, helped Sui Yuyu hide a lot. Therefore, if it wasn't for the camouflage of the Jade Medallion sect's direct disciple, all the Earth Immortals of the Aquarius continent gathered at the Ascension platform this time, which one of them wasn't a person who cultivated the human heart into a spirit, they would definitely be suspicious of Sui Yuyu. However, Sui Yuyu did not break through this time and only reached the bottleneck of the Jindan realm. She only saw more of the scenery in the sky than ordinary earth deities. She was willing to follow her teacher to the Ascension platform and sweep the falling flowers with the immortals. Unfortunately, there was no teacher or immortals by her side. Actually, Sui Yuyu had a chance to enter the nascent soul stage. However, Sui Yuyu did not know why, but at the crucial moment when the long sword on her back was willing to protect her, Sui Yuyu deliberately suppressed the infatuation sword. As she did not use her sword and was unwilling to use her sword intent to resist the astral wind, she only used the body of a cultivator to stabilize her mind and lost a greater opportunity. After Sui Yuyu left the Ascension platform, her sword heart was clear. Not only did she not look dejected, her Dao heart was even more determined. She bought some pastries at the Dragon Rider Ali's New Year's shop and then rode the wind to the prefecture city. The direct disciples of True Realm sect who left the Calligraphy Lake with Sui Yuyu were brought to the Aquarius continent by sect leader Wei Ying from the high sect Joey Peak. The two people who traveled north with Sui Yuyu were Wei Ying's direct disciples. They were sword cultivators like their master. The young woman was called Sui Yu. She always liked to go to the Great Wall of Sword Qi to sharpen her Dao. She wanted to see with her own eyes if the sword immortal Miu was as handsome as her master. The other man was called Nyan Ju. He seemed to know nothing about worldly affairs other than sword cultivation. The only thing he could do was to stop his beloved senior sister from going to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. However, the names recorded on the True Realm Sect's mountain and water register were Wei Gusu and Wei Xianyu. Their intrinsic flying swords were Fish Dragon and Wine Flask respectively. They were given to them by their master, Wei Ying. Sui Yu liked hers, and Nyan Ju liked his because there was a completely different world inside the wine flask. They left the immortal ascension stage earlier than Sui Yu. They were staying in an immortal inn in the continent city. The innkeeper's surname was Dong. He was young and had the reputation of Dong Bancheng in Beiyu's territory. Even Sui Yu and Nyan Ju, who were picky, felt that the inn's environment was not ordinary. If they came again in the future, they would choose this place. Sui Yu said telepathically, Sui Yu is so good looking. Even master likes him. Why don't you like him? Nyan Ju answered honestly, I only like those who like me. Sui Yu was furious. She scolded her stubborn junior brother, go die. Sui Yoyo's figure landed outside the inn. Dong Shirajing's immortal inn was not big but its rules were not small. Even the guests could not fly in the wind. They could only enter through the door. Sui Yu found Wei Gusu and Wei Xianyu. He said, go to Oxhorn Ferry. Wei Xianyu glanced at Sui Yu. After looking at her for so long, he was still stunned every single time. The young man glanced at his senior sister again and thought, if you keep being so unreasonable, senior sister, I'm going to fall in love with someone else. Sui Yu and the two direct disciples of the Truth Realm sect both possessed sword talismans, which allowed them to fly in the wind in the Dragon Province. As a direct disciple of the Luopa Mountain, Sui Yu obviously possessed a Pass Edict sword talisman forged by the Dragon Spring Sword sect a long time ago. However, he had spent the money of the Truth Realm sect, so there was no harm in obtaining an extra one. Sui Yu flew in the wind with his sword on his back, making his way to the Oxhorn Ferry. The sword that he had lost and then recovered was both infatuation and heart-eating. However, who knew who had eaten whose infatuation and who was the master and who was the heartless one? A man and a woman left the territory of Clearwind City that very night. They carefully concealed themselves along the way and concealed their tracks. However, when they entered the territory of the Northern Mountains, they seemed like they were going on a sightseeing tour. There was a huge difference in their ages. The old man was stooped, while the young woman was beautiful. She did not stand out too much. The old man would take out a pear blossom from time to time and twirl it gently. The young woman was not embarrassed by this. If this shopkeeper Yang really was bold enough to do that, it would be hard to say who was taking advantage of who. The old man went a little overboard. He even made fun of her for looking like a country bumpkin. They were Zhu Lian and the ruler of the Fox Kingdom of Clearwind City. One had returned home. The other had traveled far away. The current Clearwind City must have been in a state of chaos. The ruler of the Fox Kingdom was called Pei Xiong. Nascent Soul Realm, 7 Fox Tails. Zhu Lian mainly depended on Pei Xiong's decision as to whether to place the Fox Kingdom in a blessed land of lotus roots, isolated from the rest of the world, or whether to place the Fox Kingdom in a vassal mountain. However, in reality, Pei Xiong still refused to believe that a Luopa mountain could possess a medium blessed land even now. At the end of the day, she only believed in Zhu Lian and did not believe in Luopa mountain. Zhu Lian smiled and said, I forgot to remind you. When you come to my young master's mountain, you must remember one thing, and that is to treat people with sincerity. Pei Xiong was a little uneasy and her expression became more delicate. She bit her lip and said, you should be more specific. I have a good memory and am used to being submissive. She had interacted with the Shu family of Clearwind City for a long time and was most afraid of the word mountain. Zhu Lian shook his head and said, if I say more, you will slack off. And I don't need to say more. My Luopa mountain is very sunny and the wind is gentle. The wind and rain outside the mountain is just for viewing the scenery. Other mountains, like Clearwind City, have people scolding them for dividing the silver. Luorpa Mountain is different. She asked another question: are there any narrow-minded women on Luorpa Mountain? I am also very afraid of that. That Shu woman had indeed made Pei Xiong very wary. But when she thought of the woman's awkward situation, Pei Xiong could not help but laugh. Women liked to make things difficult for other women. That woman probably felt that she was not as beautiful as her and liked to put soft nails in her embroidered shoes every day. Now she was suffering from retribution. In the words of shopkeeper Yang, Shu Han had just entered the upper 5 realms anyway and was just in time to drive away bad luck for Clearwind City. Clearwind City was indeed good at creating momentum. First, the daughter of the first wife married the son of the Yuan family of the Pillar State. Then, the Shu family seemed to have used the scheming son of the first wife to form a marriage alliance with the Dao family of Zhengyang Mountain. Now that Shu Han had crossed the huge threshold and entered the upper 5 realms, with the temper of Clearwind City, if not for the disappearance of the Fox Kingdom, the news would have spread to the Snow Mountain continent, let alone the North continent. Zhu Lian laughed and said that a person who was conceited would be easily slapped. This made Pei Xiong deeply agree and feel very happy. In the end, Zhu Lian had given her a light slap on the face. In the evening, the two of them passed by the bustling Red Candle town. As long as they passed Chiduan Mountain, Luorpa Mountain would be right in front of them. Pei Xiong felt relieved. When she looked up, she could clearly see the Pailuan Mountain surrounded by clouds, which made her feel reassured. Zhu Lian bought a lot of melon seeds from a market shop and then took Pei Xiong to a street. Pei Xiong asked softly in her mind, "Who are you meeting?" Zhu Lian led the ruler of the Fox Kingdom to walk on the crowded street and answered with a smile, "The water god of the Chongdan River, Li Jin." Zhu Lian added, "He sells books and I buy books. We have always had a good relationship. A close neighbor is better than a distant relative." Because of the water god of the Jade Liquid River, it was inevitable that the Li Jin brothers would hold a grudge. After all, it was normal for a fox to mourn the death of a rabbit. This time, he had to resolve the knot in the shopkeeper's heart. After all, Zhu Lian was best at dealing with women. Did women need to be dealt with? In any case, Zhu Lian never needed them. Pei Xiong understood. Red Candle Town was located at the confluence of the 3 rivers, and there were 3 river gods. Among them, Li Jin had just been promoted by Dali a few years ago, so the incense in his ancestral temple was not bad. The Fox Kingdom was a place where crooks and dragons mixed together. News circulated very quickly on the mountain, so Pei Xiong knew a lot about the secrets of the continent. As for Zhu Lian being familiar with Li Jin, Pei Xiong was not that surprised. After all, although Li Jin's rank was not low, he was still Dali's newcomer to the mountains and rivers officialdom. Perhaps he needed to build a good relationship with Luorpa Mountain. Being familiar with Luorpa Mountain was almost equivalent to having a relationship with Lord Wei of the Pailuan Mountain. Although Pei Xiong, a nascent soul fox demon, was only 1 stage away from Wei Bian, the difference in status and true cultivation was like the difference between the clouds and the mud. Now, there was a rumor that Wei Shanjun's golden body had been nourished and refined by the 3 golden raindrops. Soon, his golden body would reach a higher level, which was equivalent to a cultivator ascending to the immortal realm. He would once again become the mountain lord with the purest golden body and the highest Dharma form among the 5 great mountains in the continent. The shopkeeper was a handsome young man in black. Lying on a rattan chair, he held a pot of tea and read a book. However, Pei Xiong did not look at Li Jin. When it came to looks, the worst thing was to be compared. After Li Jin saw Zhu Lian, who was wearing a mask, he quickly recognized the other party's identity. It could not be helped, the other party was too familiar with the place. The few erotic books on the bookshelf were in the hands of the guy in a few blinks of an eye. In the past, he often loved them so much that he could not put them down. In the end, he was reluctant to buy them. Today, he was generous and did not hesitate. He had a posture of "I am a scholar. If I buy books, even if I only take a look at the price, I am ashamed of the sage books." It seemed that Zhu Lian had earned a lot of money from this trip. Li Jin glanced at the young girl. Since she was the righteous deity of the river, He could see some clues. However, he still couldn't determine her level. It doesn't matter. This was the answer anyway. So, she was at the level of nascent soul? Right, the Shu family of Qingfeng City had a famous fox kingdom. The fox skin beauties were sold to the dynasties and immortal mansions. What a fox beauty! Why did she board Zhu Lian's pirate ship? Was Luopo Mountain planning to completely fall out with Qingfeng City? This Zhu Lian was indeed the backbone of Luopo Mountain. Even if the young mountain master was not at home, he could still be so decisive. Li Jin had many guesses in his heart, but he only pretended that he did not recognize Zhu Lian. He did not look at Pei Xiong and continued to drink tea and read books. He was the shopkeeper of his bookstore. Buy it or not, bargain and scram. Perhaps the real smart person was like Li Jin. He saw through it but did not say it out loud, pretending to be a fool. Whether it was a lucky person who was born as a human, or a mountain and lake spirit who had cultivated with great difficulty, it was not easy to learn how to speak, but had to learn not to speak to be considered smart. Sigh, this world. Zhu Lian snapped his fingers and Pei Xiong immediately took out an inkstone. There were 2 words inscribed on it, Mountain Lord. Later, Zhu Lian used Xiaozhuan to inscribe a string of words and a mark. The stone life was 10,000 years, the paper life was 1,000 years, the life was 100 years, the real life was a few years. Zhu Lian's personal mark was Silent Marquis. Zhu Lian took the inkstone. Pei Xiong had already told him how to open the mountain and river restriction of this item. She actually had an extremely precious item close to her. It could be considered the treasury of the Fox Kingdom and also her private stash. She was not afraid of Zhu Lian getting his hands on it, but Zhu Lian was not interested. When a woman's body and mind were honest with a man, if that man had a little conscience, he should be burdened. Zhu Lian happened to be most afraid of this. Therefore, Zhu Lian did not have any thoughts about this ruler of the Fox Kingdom. Zhu Lian took out 2 sketches with fine brushes and placed one of them on the counter. He turned to the water god and smiled. Shopkeeper, would you like to take a look? Li Jin stood up after hearing this. He smiled and placed the teapot and books on the side table. On the side table, there was already a bronze flower engraved with cloud dragon patterns. It was extremely exquisite and the dragon whiskers could be seen clearly. There were several peach blossoms in the bronze flower engraved. Li Jin came to the side of the counter and smiled knowingly. Sir, it's vulgar of me to buy with money. Why don't we exchange books for paintings? It was also the first time Pei Xiong saw this painting. It was probably done by shopkeeper Yang when he was free in the spice shop in Clearbreeze City. She glanced at Zhu Lian. Her bright eyes were bright and full of amorous feelings. Zhu Lian did not comment on Li Jin's suggestion and opened the second painting. The first painting was of the carp Gao Shi. The scholar had an elegant appearance and was riding a large carp. The carp only revealed its head and tail and its huge body was shrouded in the vast white clouds. Zhu Lian printed the 8 characters in Xiaozhuan. My heart is deep and serene, the realm of great enlightenment. The other painting was of the Dragon Gate overlooking the rapids. It was the scholar holding the Dragon Gate's pillar with one hand and the 8 characters in Xiaozhuan were printed in Xiaozhuan. It was a superb painting. Li Jin's smile deepened and he clicked his tongue. Brother Zhu Lian, you're so generous. Zhu Lian nodded and smiled. Brother Li Jin, you have a good eye. Li Jin's gaze did not stay on the painting for long. He leaned against the counter. Say it, what's the price? It's hard to buy a good heart with money. Take it as a good omen. Even if it's Guyu money, it's negotiable. Alias Li Jin, real carp. Zhu Lian patted the back of Pei Xiong's hand and she understood. Her movements were gentle as she carefully rolled up the painting and tied the string. Zhu Lian chuckled. We've dealt with money for a long time. Let's not talk about money today. How about exchanging books for paintings? Li Jin looked at the 2 paintings and looked away. He shook his head and smiled. It's still the same old rules. Brothers settle accounts clearly. Zhu Lian did not mind and laughed. Then I'll give it to brother Li Jin. Li Jin nodded and reached out to cover the painting. Thank you. The shop will make an exception for brother Zhu in the future. All books will be 20% off. Pei Xiong was so smart that she immediately understood the meaning of both sides. Zhu Lian, as the head housekeeper, hoped that Luopa Mountain and Chongdan River would interact more, each taking what they needed and accumulating more incense. However, Li Jin, as the water god of Chongdan River, also declined Zhu Lian's alliance. Zhu Lian took a step back. The two sides called each other brothers, but it was only a personal friendship. They parted on good terms. Zhu Lian took Pei Xiong to Chiduan Mountain, which was adjacent to Red Candle Town. While walking, Zhu Lian picked up a branch to use as a walking stick, looking more and more like an old man. Pei Xiong asked casually, if it's not a white sketch, but a bright red carp, wouldn't it be more to his liking? Zhu Lian shook his head. For example, I know that Pei Xiong is the root of a fox spirit, but if in front of Pei Xiong, is it appropriate to call her a fox spirit every time they meet? It's not appropriate. If nothing goes wrong, Li Jin will add color to the painting himself. There's no need for an outsider to do it for him. Zhu Lian smiled and asked, you don't believe me, right? Let's make a bet. A small bet is fun, a piece of snow costs money. Pei Xiong was not willing to bet with him, as it did not matter who won or lost. Along the way, not only Pei Xiong, the nascent soul stage fox spirit, all the earth immortal cultivators in Aquarius continent, when they raised their heads slightly, they could see the golden lotus covering the entire continent. With Aquarius continent as a treasure bottle, a lotus flower bloomed. In the spring breeze, swaying with the wind. Such a phenomenon, even Pei Xiong felt that it was inconceivable. But after a long time, she became accustomed to it, and treated it as a rare beauty to appreciate. On the way back to his hometown, Zhu Lian rarely appreciated this pleasing scenery. Zhu Lian only asked her about the flower deity temple division officer recorded in the book, whether or not he was really in charge of the flower deity lake. Pei Xiong only treated it as a pure martial grandmaster, and did not care about it. Zhu Lian was also unwilling to tell her the inside story. After all, it was a good reunion. Whether or not they could part, it was not just him. The human heart was as fragile as glass. Unless the young master was at the top of the mountain. Zhu Lian chose a secluded path on Chidun Mountain. In the past, when Pei Qian and Zhu Mili came to wait for the young master, they liked to take this path. He believed that Pei Qian at that time did not lack that crazy demonic sword technique. After leaving home for many years, there were many changes. For example, previously in Red Candle Town, he found out that Chidun Mountain had one more mountain deity temple, and Luopo Mountain had one less mountain deity. The mountain deity temple on Luopo Mountain had been moved to Chidun Mountain. Its rank did not change, it seemed like the official circle was leveled, but in reality, it was demoted. Without the plaque and the statue, the building was still preserved. This move was a tacit understanding between Shan Jun Wei Pai and the Dali dynasty. Mountain deity Song Yuzhang did not have any complaints, as if he had already expected this day to come. Instead, before moving, he walked out of the temple without any incense for the first time, and strolled around Luopo Mountain. He had the meaning of not having an official position. Zhu Lian could actually understand Song Yuzhang very well. But since they worked for different masters, they did not need to be friends. However, Zhu Lian had never stopped Pei Qian and the others from visiting the temple on the top of the mountain. Apart from the matter of the mountain deity temple, Zhu Lian also received a congratulatory message from Li Jin, the water god of the Chongdan River. That was because the great python of Yellow Lake Mountain had actually been bold enough to leave the mountain and walk on the river. Since Li Jin had congratulated him, the woman in yellow must have succeeded. Li Jin was cautious. Earlier in the bookstore, he had only spoken about this with Zhu Lian mentally. As a proper nascent soul cultivator, Pei Xiong could still sense it even when she was on the border of the Dragon Province. She immediately rode the wind to a high altitude and gazed at the rapid changes in the water of the Dragon Province in the distance. She was certain that something huge was going on in the water. Zhu Lian found the journey to be dull, so he just told Pei Xiong about it. He gave her a rough explanation, but it was definitely closer to the truth than Pei Xiong's wild guesses about the origins of the water serpent. Earlier, Pei Xiong rode the wind in the sky and used the ability to observe mountains and rivers. Although the fate of the mountains and rivers surged at the confluence of the three rivers, and there were also gods casting illusions, blurring her vision, Paeseong was certain that the great python with the startling presence as it walked on the water must have been a prominent existence like a protector of the Dragon Spring Sword sect. Otherwise, how could it walk on the water so smoothly? Let alone the torrential flood, it also seemed like there were water gods from various places protecting it along the way, just in case the flood washed onto the shore and affected the people, incurring the wrath of the heavens. If regular people of water died, they would already be extremely fortunate if the various shrines of the mountains and rivers did not make things difficult for them. In the eyes of the regular masters at the foot of the mountain, the territory of the Dragon Province that was particularly vast in Dallas Old Territory was nothing more than torrential rain. Day was like night, the sky darkened, and the rivers surged. However, in the eyes of the cultivators on the mountain, it was a magnificent transformation into a serpent. Since Paeseong had mentioned it a long time ago and they were close to home, Julian no longer hid anything. She's called Hongxia. She's been cultivating on a vassal mountain of Luopa Mountain for a very long time now. You can basically be considered half a family now. You're both women, so if your personalities are compatible, you can just keep in contact with each other in the future. There's no such thing as a small mountain or not in Luopa Mountain. It's all on the table. There's a difference between those who are close and those who are distant. There were only a few rules of the mountain anyway. Even Xiaomi could recite them like the back of her hand. Paeseong was slightly surprised. She grumbled, "Why didn't you tell me about this assistance that can't be underestimated? A nascent soul realm water serpent. She could completely treat it as half a chi practitioner of the unpolished jade realm." Aside from sword cultivators, who would be bold enough to provoke a water serpent that possessed a powerful body and innate ability so easily? Especially those immortal sects that were close to the rivers and rivers. Once they became enemies with it, it was simply an invitation from the King of Hell. If they accepted it, they would die. If they didn't accept it, they would also die. If Shu Han of Clearwind City had not already ascended to the upper 5 realms, and as a military cultivator, he was famous for his killing power. Otherwise, Luopa Mountain would be able to go head-to-head with Clearwind City with just this water serpent and Zhu Lian. Miss Hongxia, it's good that you're able to make Paeseong feel more at ease. Zhu Lian smiled. In the face of Paeseong's shock, he only mentioned it briefly and did not say much. Unfortunately, in her hometown, Hongxia did not dare to go to Luopa Mountain to say a word. If Zhu Lian did not remember wrongly, Hongxia had not even seen Jise Peak's ancestral hall. What Zhu Lian was more worried about now was that Chen Lingjun had blasphemed the river in the North Continent. Since there was no definite news that had reached the Aquarius continent, it meant that Chen Lingjun had not caught fire. He did not care too much about Chen Lingjuan's far more exaggerated result of catching fire than Hongxia. Zhu Lian was only worried that Chen Lingjuan's temper was too jumpy. When he was outside, without anyone to take care of him, he would easily be at a disadvantage. With Chen Lingjuan's temper, it was fine in his hometown. Anyway, he had already obediently accepted his fate. He would not care about his face even if he was beaten to death. He glorified it as the world's grievances are a matter of one punch. But outside, he probably liked to puff himself up at his own cost. Paeseong was in a good mood. She plucked a tree flower and handed it to Zhu Lian. Zhu Lian waved his hand and smiled. The uglier a person is, the more they love to wear flowers. You should wear it. In the past, in the lotus flower-blessed land, there was the custom of men wearing flowers. Otherwise, in the future, it would be the flower hairpin man Jusha. Paeseong glared at him, but still wore the flower hairpin. Zhu Lian could travel with the wind. Paeseong was also an earth immortal of the nascent soul realm. When she felt like it, it did not matter whether there was a path under her feet or not. Zhu Lian came to a deserted ridge of Chiduan Mountain, but it was already a little far from the temple where Song Yuzhang was. Zhu Lian stood on the branch of an ancient pine with his hands behind his back. He smiled knowingly. It was obvious that this was Luopa Mountain. Paeseong sat on the branch. Her 2 fingers gently pressed against the tree flower beside her ear. Zhu Lian sighed. Which family dares to hang a sign saying that there is no trouble? There is peace in tofu and vegetables. One can eat and wear warm clothes. One can sleep today and wake up tomorrow. This is the peaceful world for us ordinary teachers. Paeseong joked, I'm not boasting, but how can you and I be considered ordinary teachers? Zhu Lian looked up at the sky and said softly, even if we are only below one person, we are all ordinary. In Zhu Lian's old hometown, even if the junior Ding Ying's martial arts realm was higher. But in terms of state of mind, it was not necessarily so. Ding Ying was born with the times and took advantage of the situation. Whether his fist technique was high or not, it was actually just an external matter in Zhu Lian's eyes. According to Pei Qian's later narration, Ding Ying was at least unable to achieve what Zhu Lian did back then. It could even be said that the path that the demon Ding Ying took was the one that the martial arts maniac Zhu Lian stepped on. That immortal laurel was something that Zhu Lian casually threw to the young Ding Ying. Zhu Lian killed 9 people by himself, killing all the experts in the world. In his eyes, there was no one around him. But Zhu Lian did not feel that it was a magnificent feat. It was still far from what he imagined. For example, the senior on Luopo Mountain was already far away in Zhu Lian's heart. Zhu Lian had to walk over step by step to see him clearly. One of the 3 portraits on Luopo Mountain was of the martial artist Kui Cheng. And the reason why the old man who had been crazy for more than 100 years was led to Luopo Mountain was because of that middle-aged monk who traveled with alms bowls and eventually created lotuses with each step. Paeseong stretched out her finger and said, "That is Luopo Mountain?" Zhu Lian nodded, surrounded by mountains and rivers, surrounded by mountains and rivers. Among them, the most profound is my hometown. Paeseong joked, so sour, you know how to make pickled fish? Because Zhu Lian had once joked that he claimed to be number 1 in cooking. His fist technique was passable, and he was also good at zither, chess, calligraphy and painting. Zhu Lian laughed aloud. Paeseong, you just happened to mention that, so let me give you a reminder. On Luopo Mountain, no one apart from the young master should talk about pickled fish, or it'll be easily recorded in the account book. Under the resplendent night sky of the river, the 2 of them walked along the path of Chestun Mountain again. Zhu Lian walked slowly, while Paeseong had nothing to do, so she raised her head and admired the scenery. In the end, they arrived at the final slope of Chestun Mountain. Zhu Lian pulled back his fist and gazed into the distance. He sighed emotionally for no reason. Waking up from a dream is like jumping off a cliff. Paeseong asked with a smile, "What do you mean?" Zhu Lian shook his head. "There's no solution." Paeseong did not think too much about that. Zhu Lian's occasional words were often strange, leaving her at a loss. She could not help but think of the water serpent that had already reached the same realm as her. That great python sure was lucky when it hit the water. Is it because of your Dali Dragon Province? The Dragon Province is a good name, Zhu Lian said. No matter how good the name of the Dragon Province is, it's still not as good as my young master's name. Paeseong extended a finger and rubbed her forehead gently. Her head hurt. Zhu Lian. If you keep acting like this, I'm going to suspect something. Zhu Lian muttered to himself. The dog glanced at him, he glanced at me, and I glanced at the world. Is it really true? I'm becoming more and more uncertain. Zhu Lian added very soon, it's just the ravings of a fool. Paeseong, you don't have to worry about it. Paeseong asked, if I ask you and you answer me, won't that prove that it's you instead? Zhu Lian shook his head and sighed emotionally. How would I know whether you're real or not? It's pointless to ask and pointless to answer. Paeseong was rather irritated. However, she also felt rather relieved. For Zhu Lian to be so honest, he already treated her as no longer an outsider. Paeseong asked, then just who can give you an answer? Zhu Lian raised a hand and pointed at the sky, before extending his hand and pointing into the distance. In the end, he clapped his hand gently. The sun and moon are in the sky. My heart is bright. I'm a good person. If this person tells me the answer, I'll believe it. Zhu Lian shook his sleeves and said in a self-deprecating manner, don't worry, I rarely do that. It's because I'm close to home. Paeseong's mind was rather unsettled. A person who thought like that would probably find it very strange and very lonely. Zhu Lian had already sorted out his emotions and continued on his way. In the past, he traveled alone in his hometown, traveling through the stars and wearing the moon. In the night, Yuan Xiu stood by the banks of the Jade Nectar River. Hong Xia, who was temporarily recuperating and stabilizing her cultivation, immediately circulated her divine ability and hurriedly came out of the water to see Yuan Xiu. Before transforming into a flood dragon, Hong Xia had been trembling with fear when facing Yuan Xiu. She had never thought that after transforming into a flood dragon, she would be even more distracted and unable to control herself. Therefore, after successfully transforming into a flood dragon, Hong Xia's uncontrollable joy from before had been reduced by at least half. That Jade Nectar River's water goddess was hesitant and timid. A moment after Hong Xia appeared, she also came to see Yuan Xiu. Yuan Xiu looked at the two of them. One had transformed into a flood dragon and the other had been conferred the title of a water goddess. Yuan Xiu did not speak. She only took small bites of a peach blossom cake. The water goddess had already banished all the officials and river diamonds of the underwater estate in this part of the Jade Nectar River, just in case she accidentally angered this woman in green with a ponytail before her. Earlier, after receiving Yuan Xiu's decree, the woman in yellow was uneasy in the pouring rain at night. She chose a source of water and revealed herself, beginning to catch fire. Currently, there were actually only 3 immortal mountains in the Dragon Province: the Dragon Spring Sword Sect, the Cloud Shroud Mountain, and the Luopa Mountain. As a result, the incident this time went so smoothly that the woman in yellow who had changed her name to Hong Xia only felt like she was dreaming. First, she made her way out of a mountain through a source of water. The river Granny Ma Lanhua of the Dragon Whisker River had a divine position but no ancestral temple. The river Granny only dared to send her off flatteringly while helping to detain Hong Xia at the same time. Afterwards, she made her way through the Tiefu River that had the greatest amount of water. She did not show herself, but she did suppress the water. Afterwards, she made her way through a small section of the Embroidery River before finally making her way upstream to the Chongdan River that was the most precipitous and had the greatest amount of water. The 2 river gods both protected her like they were her protectors. Hong Xia's journey was just so smooth and unhindered. In the end, she could even go to a natural cave in the Jade Nectar River that was abundant with spiritual qi to heal. It was fellow Hong Xia that the water goddess had personally come to invite. The water goddess of the Jade Nectar River was truly envious of the great python's fortuitous encounter. On the other hand, let alone fortuitous encounters of the Great Path, it seemed like all she had was disasters. The woman in green said nothing. Hong Xia and the water goddess became even more silent out of fear. Yuan Xiu ate the cake and glanced at Hong Xia. How unsightly. No wonder she lost to a little loach. Hong Xia carefully glanced at Yuan Xiu's wrist. A fire dragon was coiled like a bracelet. The fire dragon that was originally lifeless immediately turned its eyes nimbly and stared at Hong Xia. Hong Xia's heart immediately trembled. He hurriedly shifted his gaze and stabilized his Dao heart with difficulty. Only then did he not follow his heart and retreat. The fire dragon was already in the upper 5 realms. It was definitely in the upper 5 realms. Yuan Xiu probably did not know that her slow eating of the pastries was a great torture for the 2 people in front of her. It was like a fish being cooked in a pot of oil. Even if she knew, she probably wouldn't care. Yuan Xiu had just returned to the world. It was the middle-aged Confucian scholar who helped to open the door. She was afraid that her father would scold her for causing trouble, so she came here to hide. Because she was in a bad mood, she naturally did not have a good expression when she looked at Hong Xia. Yuan Xiu gently shook her wrist. The fire dragon that had obtained a strange water disaster in the outer space was extremely docile to its master and continued to sleep. For the most ordinary descendants of the mountains and lakes, being able to successfully cross a river was already considered a success. If they were lucky and had a righteous bloodline, they might be able to obtain some auspicious characteristics of the flood dragon, such as dragon claws, dragon scales, or dragon whiskers. Just like the eel demon of the Tongyi continent, he had tried to cross the river in the past. If not for the water goddess stopping him, he would have turned into a flood dragon long ago. As for the water descendants of the Great Swamp who were originally flood dragons, they needed to cross at least a huge river before they could be considered righteous by the heavenly Tao. Apart from having a flood dragon's body that was righteous, the key was that they could nurture a natal flood dragon pearl. But 3,000 years ago, the calamity that affected all the water descendants of the world was seen as there were no more true dragons in the world, only the many dragon descendants with impure bloodlines were left. In addition to the great blasphemy of the world, there were only a few. Along the way, there were many sects, and the flood dragons did not dare to be rash. Not to mention crossing tens of thousands of miles, they would hide at the bottom of the water and find a nest with relatively dense water fate, and casually hang a signboard of some dragon palace, some underwater residence, and burn incense. Thus, a flood dragon that succeeded in crossing the river and turning into a dragon did not appear for 3,000 years. Of the thousands of flood dragons in the world, who did not want to turn into a dragon? But who dared? Because no one dared to determine whether the unknown sword immortal that killed the true dragon would attack again. Until the Aquarius continent, there was a flood dragon covered in snow-white scales that crossed the river, and the true dragon returned to its position. In one fell swoop, it seized an immeasurable portion of the world's water fate. This small python under Hongxia, compared to the GQ of the clay bottle alley, was worlds apart. Even the little thing that followed behind the GQ was not as good as it. Ruan Xiu raised her chin towards the surface of the jade liquid river. Go back. A water flood dragon and a water god, as if they were pardoned. They immediately dived into the water, and looked at each other from afar. They did not dare to communicate telepathically, and only felt that they were in the same boat. Ruan Xiu frowned, still looking at the river in front of her, and asked, "Is it beautiful?" An old boatman slowly floated down the water with the help of wormwood. Even though they were dozens of miles apart, Ruan Xiu's voice was clearly heard by the old boat. He did not answer, and only clicked his tongue in wonder. A young female Taoist priest stood at the bow of the boat, looked at Ruan Xiu, and smiled. "Miss Ruan, we meet again." In the past, Ruan Xiu had a good impression of He Xiaoyong, who used the identity of the female Taoist priest of Shenao sect to travel around the Pearl Grotto heaven. But now, it was not good. North Continent's Cool Breeze sect master He Xiaoyong. Beside him stood a deer-riding goddess who walked out of the skeleton beach city of murals. She was instructed to stand behind her master He Xiaoyong, because she only took a glance at the green-clothed lady, and felt that she was dazzling, and started to feel uneasy. He Xiaoyong and old boat Z, who was half a senior brother, had received a mysterious decree from their master not long ago. There were only two things, one was related to Chen Lingjun, and the other was for He Xiaoyong to return to the Aquarius continent to find GQ from Clay Bottle Alley and Ma Kuxuan from Apricot Blossom Alley. He Xiaoyong could also meet a senior brother. As for old boat Z, compared to that junior brother, he wanted to go to Old Dragon City to meet Madame Gui Moore. Li Shisheng crossed the central divine continent in one step, and came to the gate of Fulu Street in his hometown. After paying his respects to his parents, Li Shisheng came to the small pond where his sister lived. Looking at a small golden crab inside, he smiled. Mo Dao is fearless of thunder and lightning, and the Sea Dragon King is also rampant. Zhu Lian and Pei Xiong walked out of Qidun Mountain, and continued to return slowly. Near the foot of Luopo Mountain, Pei Xiong saw a little girl in black, with her arms crossed, hugging a green bamboo cane and a golden carrying pole, standing straight, with her eyes wide open, as if she was a little water monster in charge of guarding the mountain gate. Pei Xiong could not help but laugh. Your Luopo Mountain is really. She did not know how to describe the mountain wind of Luopo Mountain. Zhu Lian introduced. She is our Luopo Mountain's right protector. Pei Xiong laughed out loud. Zhu Lian said, I am not lying to you. Xiao Mi Li is the right protector on Luopo Mountain's register, and her seat in the Jise Peak's ancestral hall is very close to the front. Pei Xiong was skeptical. Really? Zhu Lian laughed. That's right. When you see Xiao Mi Li later, just go straight to the point and say, you are the legendary Mute Lake water monster. She will be very happy. He wiped off the skin on his face, and restored the face of Luopo Mountain's old chef. Pei Xiong also took off the skin on her face, and then removed the camouflage. Zhu Mi Li rubbed her eyes, and then ran all the way to Zhu Lian, sobbing, old chef, old chef. I thought you were lost and did not know how to go home. I did not dare to go to Red Candle Town to pick you up. The little girl was so sad that she could not speak. She did not care about her face, and even accidentally admitted that she did not dare to go to Red Candle Town and Jade Liquid River. Zhu Lian reached out and rubbed Xiao Mi Li's head, shook the big bag on his back, and said with a smile, "Guess what's inside." Xiao Mi Li wiped her tears, looked timidly at the woman beside old chef, pursed her lips tightly, and bowed to Pei Xiong. Pei Xiong smiled and nodded. Just now, she was so focused on whether old chef had gained weight or lost weight that she did not see this beautiful sister. Pei Xiong remembered Zhu Lian's reminder, and said with a smile, "You are the mute lake water monster?" Zhu Mi Li was stunned on the spot. She did not know whether to scratch her face or her head. Oh ho! Why did this sister suddenly look better? Maybe this is what Pei Qian always said about a girl changing 18 times between childhood and womanhood. Sigh, change my head, what's so good about growing up? However, Xiao Mi Li did not dare to say that to Pei Qian. Zhu Mi Li remembered old chef's question, and said softly, "The kind of immortal book that Pei Qian mentioned? The little people in the picture, the ones that can fight?" Unfortunately, Pei Qian is not willing to say more. "Can you let me take a look? I like to read now, and I am very knowledgeable." When Pei Qian comes home, she will be shocked. Zhu Lian's face turned red, and he said helplessly, "It's melon seeds." Zhu Mi Li sighed, and said like an old man, "You are already an adult, and you are still eating melon seeds." However, the little girl quickly smiled and said, "Since I have already bought it, let's just leave it at that." Zhu Lian smiled and nodded. The long-awaited mountain breeze was no longer just a distant memory. "I have already returned home, and I am in this mountain." A little water monster seemed to have turned into a little yellow sparrow in the mountains. It hopped around Zhu Lian and chattered about its family affairs. Xiao Mi Li did not say some things that could not be said. Pei Qian was first, she was second, and Sister Nuanshu could only be third. Pei Xiong felt that it was ridiculous, and could only ask in her heart, "Is this little girl really the right protector of Luopo Mountain?" The protector position of the sect and immortal cave abode on the mountain had a lot of weight, and was said to be half of the mountain and river formation by the immortal master. Pei Xiong was sure that this little water monster's realm was not only not high, it was simply ridiculously low. Since this little girl was the right protector, could it be that Hongxia was the left protector? Or the head of Luopo Mountain? However, that Zhu Lian actually turned a deaf ear, and only cared about talking to the little girl about trivial matters. Pei Xiong laughed in anger. "Serves you right to be called old chef." Just as Pei Xiong was feeling a little depressed, it quickly turned into horror. A handsome man in white appeared out of thin air, and smiled at Zhu Lian. "You are learning from others. Are you satisfied being a shopkeeper? How many years has it been?" Pei Xiong only felt that this person was as handsome as a jade mountain. In her eyes, this person's looks were only slightly inferior to Zhu Lian's. Shan Jun, Wei Pai. The first deity position in the northern mountains of the continent. Zhu Lian sighed, "After being away from home for a long time, I miss brother Wei." Wei Pai twitched the corner of his mouth, "Forget it. Don't blame me for being unrighteous." Zhu Lian immediately rubbed his hands and said, "Shan Jun's cultivation has soared, and the heavens and earth should congratulate you. When the chaotic world is over, we will have a proper night banquet." Wei Pai ignored Zhu Lian and nodded to the king of the Fox Country. He roughly guessed Zhu Lian's plan. How despicable. Zhu Lian's hoe directly dug out half of the wealth of the Shu family of Clearwind City. Pei Xiong hurriedly bowed to Lord Shan Jun. She was graceful and charming, but she did not do it on purpose. Xiaomi smiled and called out Wei Shan Jun, Wei Shan Jun, Wei Shan Jun. Usually, she would only call him twice, but today, she was so happy that she called him again. Wei Pai understood, bent slightly, and opened his palm. Xiaomi put down a large handful of melon seeds. Wei Pai thanked her and naturally ate the melon seeds, and telepathically told Zhu Lian to put away the business. Pei Xiong's eyelids twitched. When Zhu Lian heard what Wei Pai said, he sneered, "That little brat saved his life." The surviving member of the Zhu Ying dynasty who came to Luopo Mountain to take refuge and escaped disaster had also received a secret order from Dali, but did not go to the ascension platform. The young sword cultivator had given up the great fortune of being in a favorable position. This was of course a clear indication from the emperor of the Song dynasty and Luopo Mountain. Dali already knew of this person's background, but was still willing to let bygones be bygones. The pursuit of the Ministry of Justice would stop. Zhu Lian was more satisfied with the choice of that homeless dog. It was very wise. He did not push his luck. Luopo Mountain gave him a place to stay, so he should be content. If he still dared to rely on Luopo Mountain and did not know the severity of the matter, mistakenly thinking that a life-saving talisman could be used as a long-term protective talisman, then Zhu Lian would stick a life-hastening talisman on his corpse. Otherwise, when he returned to Luopo Mountain, the second thing Zhu Lian would do would definitely be the will-seeking fist. And Zhu Lian's will-seeking fist was to determine life and death. As for the first thing, of course, it was to send melon seeds to Nuan Shu, Xiaomi, and the others, and then make a table of delicious mountain seasonal dishes. When the time came, he would take off his apron and go to the will-seeking fist. Zhu Lian raised his head. Then Pei Xiong saw a man in a green robe slowly walking down the mountain with a gentle smile. Zhu Lian was stunned. He glanced at Wei Pai. Wei Pai deliberately did not mention this matter. Anyway, Brother Zhu had already returned home, so he could see for himself. In those years of secret planning in Qingfeng City, Zhu Lian did not have any secret communication with Luopo Mountain, just in case, to prevent all his efforts from falling short. After all, that Madame Shu was really not easy to deal with. For example, regarding the matter of using the Fox country to secretly gather literary luck, even now, Zhu Lian had already discovered the clues, but Pei Xiong still did not tell him frankly. Therefore, Zhu Lian really did not know this person's identity. He only saw that the other party was a sword cultivator with a high realm. Miu smiled and said to Zhu Lian telepathically, "Greetings, head butler. I come from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Miu, Mi as in white rice, U as in rich, a jade unpolished realm sword cultivator. In Luopo Mountain, Brother Zhu can call me Yu Mi." Zhu Lian cupped his fists and said with a smile, "Brother Yu is so handsome, you have added a lot of color to my Luopo Mountain." Miu hurriedly cupped his fists and returned the greeting, I don't dare, I don't dare." Wei Pai smiled playfully. Zhu Xiaomi blinked at Yu Mi, then quietly leaned back a little and threw a look at the bag on old chef's back, indicating to Yu Mi old chef went home today and bought a lot of melon seeds. Pei Xiong felt that she was a little unsociable, and was even more shocked by that Brother Yu. The sword Qi was too heavy. Of course, Miu was not deliberately showing off his realm. It was too boring. In truth, Miu had just returned from Old Dragon City to Luopo Mountain not long ago, and the sword Qi that was mixed with the killing intent had not faded, and was naturally revealed. And this was the result of Miu deliberately suppressing the sword intent. Other than Miu and Zhu Lian who returned to Luopo Mountain, there were still people rushing over. Zhong Qiu, Cao Qinglang. They had finally returned to Aquarius Continent. They came from the north, riding on the Hemp Sect's ferry. To directly return to Aquarius Continent from the Central Plains, firstly, there was no ferry, and secondly, it was too dangerous. Thus, Teacher Zhong brought Cao Qinglang to the Pure Jade Continent, to the North Continent, and then took the ferry to return to the south. The other group of people was Sui Jingcheng and his senior brother Rong Chang of Floating Duckweed Sword Lake. They were returning from the south of Aquarius Continent, and would once again pass by Luopo Mountain. During this time, they specially went to Old Dragon City to find their master, Li Cai. Li Cai did not allow her eldest disciple Rong Chang to remain on the battlefield, as she said that if she died, Floating Duckweed Sword Lake would be bullied half to death, so Rong Chang should not join in the fun. Anyway, Floating Duckweed Sword Lake had her as the sect leader, and while they did not win much, they would not lose face. At this time, on the mountain, outside the bamboo building, the sword cultivator Kui Wei who was cultivating at the Sword Reverence Arena was about to leave the mountain. It was to bid farewell to senior sword immortal Miu, and also to take a look at the talisman Jiang Chu. Kui Wei also went to the Ascension Arena. He was already a nascent soul sword cultivator. Currently, Wei Pai, the northern mountain lord, was one of the more leisurely ones. It was not that Wei Pai was lazy, but in truth, in the few battles after the opening of the sky screen, from start to finish, he did not need to do anything, and only took advantage of the situation. He reckoned that when he met his colleague, Middle Mountain Lord Jin Qing, the other party would say many strange things. Zhu Lian pulled Wei Pai, Miu, and the accountant Wei Wenlong together to discuss serious matters. There were too many things to discuss, and none of them were small. Even the matter of settling down in the Fox Kingdom was not the most important. Pei Xiong followed the little girl in the pink dress named Chen Nuanshu, and the strange little Xiaomi, to an elegant courtyard to stay. Pei Xiong's mood was complicated, and she could not sleep at night, so she left her residence and walked alone, sitting on the steps of the mountain top. She felt that her current mood was too unreasonable. Before she arrived at Luopo Mountain, she was afraid that Luopo Mountain's resources were too weak. She did not expect that Luopo Mountain would be filled with one strange thing after another, and she could not help but feel anxious. Then, Pei Xiong realized that Zhu Lian should have finished his discussion, and was now accompanying Center Yuanji down the mountain. Zhu Lian realized that Center Yuanji's fist technique had improved greatly, and knew that she had received guidance from Liu Shiliu. Zhu Lian let Center Yuanji continue up the mountain, and he took the lead in quickly ascending to sit beside Pei Xiong. Zhu Lian said softly, "Did you just realize that you are already in a foreign land? Don't worry, it won't take long for you to get used to it." Pei Xiong asked softly, "Yang Fang, have you always been secretly laughing at me for being a frog at the bottom of a well?" Zhu Lian laughed. "When did you become so melancholy? In my impression, the ruler of the Fox Kingdom in Clearbreeze City was a heroine. Calculating, decisive, and good-looking." Pei Xiong said faintly, "If only I hadn't met you." Some women's moods were really unreasonable. When they were in a good mood, everything was good. When they were in a bad mood, everything was bad. The latter always comes out of the blue, often catching men off guard. Then don't listen to what she says in detail. Whether it's some inexplicable complaint or some irritating words that you don't know where the reason is, don't be anxious and throw yourself into confusion. Just treat it as an irrefutable reason and listen to it. Once you become impatient, or once she tries to reason with you, what can you do? You are finished. Even if you do not speak, you must listen, and look at her seriously. Whether a man was willing to do so, was often the real knot in a woman's heart. But who was Zhu Lian? Very quickly, Pei Xiong smiled. Center Yuanji stopped halfway up the mountain, wanting to see the heartwarming scene at the top of the mountain. She admired old Mr. Zhu even more. He had just returned to his hometown and had to take care of a guest for Luopo Mountain. If it was the young mountain lord sitting next to that woman, Center Yuanji would probably be worried about Sister Pei Xiong's situation. So what if it was the mountain lord? Her eyes were not good, and she liked to walk drunk at night. She liked to ignore everything and only cared about traveling alone, making old Mr. Zhu unusually busy. And she, Center Yuanji, practiced diligently every day. No one could find any fault with her. Moreover, the next time they passed each other, the gap between their fist techniques would be narrowed by her. In the small town at night, Yong family's medicine shop. Changming left Dragon Riding Alley and came here at night, knocking lightly on the door. Su Tiantian and Shi Lingshan, who had gone to an ancient battlefield to train their martial arts, had returned from their travels and continued to work as inconspicuous shop assistants. However, Shi Lingshan lived in Peachleaf Alley, and only senior sister Su Tiantian lived there. Su Biao was instructed by her master to open the door for the woman. Changming went to the back courtyard. Su Biao simply moved a stool and sat at the door. In the back courtyard, Changming bowed to the old man. She bowed as a junior and did not even take a seat. She asked if the shop needed gold essence copper coins. After all, the war was in full swing. Other than Old Dragon City's main battlefield, the other two coastal battlefields were not as desperate as Old Dragon City's, but they were also filled with smoke. Old Yang shook his head. "Thank you for your kind intentions. It wasn't easy for you to accumulate such a small amount of wealth. Use it well." The reason he was willing to speak with her, besides her sincerity, was because of her relationship with the divine path. Changming was about to leave. But the old man suddenly asked, "That shrew in the shop has a hidden line on her body, did you see it?" Changming shook her head, "I didn't see it." Old Yang changed to an old tobacco pipe. Before putting it in, he lightly knocked on the stairs. In Jiu Shu's territory, there are many mystical people. That shrew's inheritance is only one of them. At first, it was not obvious, but after a while, it became clear. Changming was extremely interested in the Aquarius continent. Luopo Mountain had a large collection of books. She frequently flipped through the books, and saw a book on Jiu Shu's 800 Immortals. The old man continued, "She has some relationship with the Beko Keikyung building's third sect master, and they are still connected. As for when the lotus will move, it depends on the other party's mood. In the future, whether or not he will return to his true home, and meet his senior brother." Changming only listened, and silently memorized it in her heart. Old Yang suddenly said, "Wild cats, the night is full of stench." Ma Ku Xian's childhood playmate had a much bigger background than Shrews' Dao Seed spirit aura. Old Man Yang pointed at the bench under the eaves. "Have a seat. Let's have a chat." Changming accepted the order and sat down. Old Yang was silent for a long time, and slowly said, "It's just a palm-sized place. There is no place in the world that can scare outsiders." 60 years ago. Kui Dong, Qi Jing Chun, this pair of senior and junior brothers who became enemies in front of the world. Kui Dong's betrayal was true, but deceiving his master and destroying his ancestors was fine. The sage of literature, Liu Shiliu, Zhun Qian. Adding Chen Pinggan, then the sage of literature's direct disciple, was only missing a few who had not appeared. The world's proudest, Bai Yi. Beko Keikyung Building's third sect master, Lu Chen, set up a fortune-telling stall. There was the Yin-Yang School's Zhu Zi, who set up a stall to sell Tanghulu. Heavenly Lord Xie Shi. Ruan Qi, Ruan Xiu, Li and Li Liu, two pairs of father and daughter. Cao Shi, Cao Jun, a pair of grandfather and grandson from Mud Bottle Alley. Blind Daoist Jiao Cheng, White Emperor City's Zheng Zhuzhong, another pair of master and disciple. One of Daoist Master's clones, Li Shisheng. Song Jiangqiang of the White Dragon Fish Robe. Mohist Shu Ruo. Alliance, who was just a few steps away from entering the small town. Just like the Mud Bottle Alley's servant girl, Ji Qiu. The first Upper Five Realms mountain monarch in the history of the Aquarius continent, Wei Yi Pai. Sword cultivator Jiang Shangzhen, Miu, Li Cai, of course. There was also the ancient sword under the bridge. To the cultivators on the mountain, a short 60 years was nothing. So as long as one's luck was not good, no matter who came here, no matter how high one's cultivation level was, if one had the guts, one's life would be hanging by a thread. Even if one was pleased for a moment, and made enemies here, and temporarily did not have to worry about one's life, one still had to look further ahead, and take it easy. After all, the young people of Pearl Grotto Heaven, especially Chen Pinggan, Ma Ku Xian's generation, went out many times, and their future was not small. For the first time, Old Yang laughed. This kind of opening is really heroic. Chang Ming held her breath and concentrated, only listening without speaking. Then she turned her head to look. A travel-worn young Confucian scholar with a bamboo chest on his back and a green bamboo cane in his hand suddenly opened the curtain. He happened to see Old Man Yang's rare smile. He laughed aloud and said, "Old man, look at how happy you are, you look silly. What's wrong? Found a wife? Old but vigorous, not bad at all." Chang Ming was stunned. The young man did not know Chang Ming's identity, and could only cup his fists and smile, and then ran to Old Yang's back and squatted, and grabbed his neck. "Did you miss me? Did you miss me?" He didn't think that Old Man Yang would have the ability to find such a beautiful sister. Chang Ming was stunned for a long time, and then suddenly laughed. "I know, it's that famous Li Huai who I have heard of for a long time. He had a good relationship with Master since young." Old Yang also allowed Li Huai to be rash, and only said, "You are still willing to come back." Li Huai let go of his hand, and sat down next to him, gently beating his legs, and complained, "This trip was so tiring. My luck is not good." Old Man Yang chuckled. Chang Ming said goodbye and left. Old Yang turned a blind eye to it. Li Huai took off the book box and put it aside, and then lay back, looking tired. Old Yang, why do you think the world suddenly became so chaotic? Old Yang said, it's okay. Li Huai asked, it has nothing to do with you, right? Old Yang did not say anything, and began to smoke. Li Huai sat up. Give me a definite answer. Do you really think you are a master beyond this world? Old arms and legs, don't try to be brave. Old Yang said, it has nothing to do with me. Li Huai was slightly relieved, and said with a cheeky smile, I saw you laughing like a thief before, not like a decent person. What good news? Did you really find a wife? It can't be. Old Yang did not say anything. Li Huai lay back down. If he could lie down, he really did not want to sit, and if he sat, he did not want to stand. Anyway, he was like this since he was young. He was used to not being high or low, and he could not compare to anyone, not to his friends. Li Huai actually did not care, but when he went on a long journey, he always encountered some things, and it was not so comfortable. But his mother always said that he was a person who enjoyed life, and the reason was his sister, who was born a bit beautiful. In the future, if he found a brother-in-law who was willing to help him, he could just lie down and enjoy life. But when Li Huai thought of his sister Li Liu, he was worried. She was not young anymore, and there was still no one to settle down. Look, after missing out on my good brother Chen Pinggan who could cut a chicken head and burn yellow paper, she can't get married, right? What did father and mother mean, especially mother, sister? Do you really not understand, or are you pretending not to understand? With our mother's temper, would she be willing to let an outsider live in the house that she prepared for her son? Old Yang seemed to know Li Huai's thoughts and said, your sister doesn't like Chen Pinggan, and you can't force a melon to be sweet. If you don't understand this, what kind of books have you been reading all these years? Li Huai rolled his eyes and said, what nonsense are you talking about? Find a wife first, then talk to me about romantic relationships. Li Huai sat up and opened the bamboo box, nagging about how much he spent. He did not spend any money on this trip to the North Continent, and now, he had broken his cultivation. The old man listened and laughed. The lazy Liu Xianyang rarely visited Luopa Mountain. He did not come often. His blacksmith shop by the river was not close to the mountain. Liu Xianyang was so lazy that he did not even go to the ascension platform. Anyway, it was not like he had not gone there in his dreams, many times. Ordinary people would not talk to me, Liu Xianyang, about how thrilling it was. Looking at Ju Mili, who was sitting on a small stool and dozing off like a chick pecking at rice, Liu Xianyang coughed softly. Ju Mili shuddered and rubbed her sleepy eyes. She immediately got up and laughed. Sleepy Liu, you're here. Liu Xianyang, who had long been given the nickname of Sleepy Liu by Little Mili, nodded first, then sat at the side and said with a smile, Little Mili, as the right guardian, it's so degrading to be a small door god. Ju Mili said helplessly, what can I do? Uncle Da Feng has gone for a long trip, and Yuan Lai has also gone down the mountain with his sister. Sister Nuanshu is so busy every day, and I'm so free. Then, the little girl said quietly, when Pei Qian comes back, he'll see me guarding the door here. I won't be able to run away from him. The little girl suddenly stretched out a hand and clenched it into a fist. Even if he runs away, I'm not afraid. I can catch him in an instant. It's like Pei Qian pressing down on the head of the left guardian of Dragon Riding Alley. Liu Xianyang crossed his arms. Ju Mili said, what's wrong? Have you thought of a mountain chieftain? Think about it, think about it. The two of us happen to be together. Unexpectedly, Liu Xianyang smiled and shook his head. Think about him, my ass. Just thinking about him makes me annoyed. The little girl, who had just taken out a handful of melon seeds to entertain Sleepy Liu, silently put them back into her sleeves. What did he say? Think about him, my ass. Then eat his ass. Little Mili shook her head lightly. Liu Xianyang held back his laughter and asked, in the past, that good mountain chieftain of yours would often follow me to the stream and find a narrow spot. I'd jump first, and he'd jump later. With a whoosh, he'd jump to the opposite bank, and with a splash, he'd fall into the water. I'd laugh at him from the opposite bank. The little girl widened her eyes and shook her head vigorously. Sleepy Liu, you're bragging without thinking. The good mountain chieftain is very, very powerful. Except that he didn't know how to recite poetry. Moreover, if the good mountain chieftain was Sleepy Liu's follower, then what about her and Pei Qian? Wouldn't their seniority be lower? Liu Xianyang shrunk his shoulders and smiled. Little mealy, little mealy. The little girl laughed mischievously. Sleepy Liu, Sleepy Liu. Liu Xianyang looked into the distance at the bright moon and joked, I have to quickly find a wife and give birth to a daughter as cute as little Mealy. Ju Mealy thought for a while and drew a circle with her little head. Generally speaking, it's very, very difficult. After eating melon seeds, it's not difficult at all. Liu Xianyang muttered, short pavilion and long pavilion and short pavilion. Short pavilion and short stop, the road back is endless. Ju Mealy's eyes lit up. Sleepy Liu, you can recite poems too. Can you lend it to me for a few days? I can show it off to Pei Qian in the future. After I'm done showing off, I'll definitely return it to you. Liu Xianyang smiled. Of course. Then, the two of them looked at the full moon together, each thinking of someone far away. The center of the Jinjiao continent. On a tragic battlefield, Pei Qian picked up a child whose face was covered in mud. This was the last remaining elite border army of a great dynasty. A total of 160,000 people were wiped out just like that. When they first met, the child was lying on the ground. The first thing he saw was a pair of broken boots soaked in blood. He stopped not far from the child. Pei Qian reached out to pull the child out of the pile of corpses. The child sat on the ground motionlessly, only staring at the young woman bathed in blood. His face was cracked, and his cheekbones were exposed. His eyes were lifeless. Yu Zhuanfu came to Pei Qian's side and looked at the skinny and pitiful child. He said to Pei Qian, "Thank you for that punch." Pei Qian squeezed out a smile and shook his head lightly. The punch she used to save Yu Zhuanfu from afar on the battlefield was learned from Lei Gong Temple's senior Pei, so Pei Qian didn't think there was anything to thank. If Master knew, would it cause him to eat a chestnut for nothing? The eye-catching young man in white stood alone on the top of a hill. On the path of cultivation, there was a Daoist number 2 in the Qingming world, who was known as the true invincible of several worlds. On the path of martial arts, this person also had a bit of an invincible spirit. After all, before him, there was still a female martial godmaster waiting for him. Cao Ci not only can punch to kill enemies, but also to save people. At most, Pei Qian could pay attention to Shi Jiejie's safety. This was also because Yu Zhuanfu was fighting side by side with her, not far away. But that Cao Ci Do Deuce's fists can take care of the battlefield far away. Worthy of being master's only rival on the path of martial arts. The opponent master finds is the same as whatever master does, always strong. But looking for the first disciple, it doesn't seem to be very good. Pei Qian said to the child, "Get up, play dead when you should, get up when you should, get up and lower your head again. This way you can live longer. If you stay here, death is death." Pei Qian actually already noticed this strange child, but couldn't take care of him before. This child is a Yao. But on the battlefield, the child from the Jinjiao continent unexpectedly protected a person. Unfortunately, the person the child protected with his life has already died without a complete corpse. And the child who just took human form not long ago was only affected by a spell and paid the price of having his longevity bridge broken. So he didn't actively play dead before, but instead fainted. When he woke up, he began to play dead. The child finally got up, silently following behind Pei Qian, limping forward. If Pei Qian walked fast, he would walk fast. If Pei Qian walked slow, he would walk slow. Yu Zhuanfu didn't hide anything, straightforwardly said, "Pei Qian, I'll say one more thing, in the future you have to fight by yourself and take care of a child, it won't be easy." Yu Zhuanfu didn't hold a grudge against the child because of his Yarrow origin. Pei Qian nodded, "It will be very difficult." She turned to look at the child who stopped in an instant. It seems that after that person died, the beastly aura on the child began to gather again, becoming more like a mountain spirit who hasn't cultivated for long and isn't very good at hiding his Yarrow origin. There's nothing sadder than a dead heart. Pei Qian stopped, turned to face the child, and asked in the language of the Jinjiao continent, "Do you want to learn fist techniques from me?" The child was indifferent, just standing there. Yu Juanfu frowned, because she saw a deep-rooted hatred in the child's eyes, towards herself and Pei Qian. It seems to be the same for the entire world and the world. It doesn't make sense, but it is the truth. The child looked at Pei Qian, finally willing to speak. He stretched out a hand, his voice was hoarse and unclear, as if it hurt the foundation of his Tao, making it difficult to speak. Yu Juanfu finally heard clearly. The child said, "Lend me money and I'll leave. I'll pay you back later." Pei Qian said, "You can earn money by learning fist techniques." The child's face was expressionless, and he lowered his head. Yu Juanfu was a bit helpless. Pei Qian and this child, what's going on? Tongyi Continent's Heavenly Fault Peak Azure Tiger Palace, the old nascent soul Lu Yong was determined to die, and found the leader of the cultivators following the army, saying that he wanted to make a deal with the Dali dynasty according to the rules set by the imperial tutor. The stout general nodded, saying that it was negotiable. Then, he immediately summoned 2 secretaries from the Great Li dynasty to discuss the details with the foreign nascent soul stage cultivator. They also brought a secret record with them, which recorded detailed information about the Green Tiger Palace and Lu Yong in the Tongyi continent. One of the secretaries suggested to the general that Lu Yong didn't need to go to the battlefield to kill demons in exchange for battle merits, he could just refine pills, and his battle merits would only be greater. The general frowned and directly asked the young civil official how the so-called conversion of alchemy into battle merits was calculated. "This Lu Yong is putting his life on the line to discuss this with us. Could you please explain it to us in detail?" The secretaries first discussed with their colleagues, and then frankly and honestly, according to Dallas' established rules, they gave the general and Lu Yong a detailed explanation. The young civil official spoke quickly, and his words were precise, without any ambiguity. For example, Lu Yong and the Azure Tiger Palace didn't need to provide any of the heavenly materials and earthly treasures needed for alchemy, and they just didn't want to haggle over wages with Dali. For example, if the Azure Tiger Palace's alchemy methods could really have an immediate effect on cultivators and pure martial artists, then as long as Lu Yong was willing to go public with Dali, they could calculate a considerable amount of battle merits. The general only interrupted and said that Lu Yong didn't need to worry. If he wasn't willing to give out the secret alchemy formulas, Dali wouldn't make things difficult for the Azure Tiger Palace, and he wouldn't settle accounts later. Lu Yong was overjoyed. He suppressed the excitement in his heart, and agreed to everything. From the beginning to the end, it took less than an hour. The 2 secretaries gave Lu Yong an extremely detailed account of where Lu Yong and all the alchemists of the Green Tiger Palace were going, how they were going, the prices of the various elixirs, how they were going to calculate their battle merits, and the people who were going to meet them at the temporary station. After finishing their discussion, the 2 young civil officials quickly left. The general only cupped his fists, and didn't exchange any pleasantries with them. Lu Yong sighed in his heart. Dallas Border Army's thunderous momentum didn't only lie on the battlefield. Dallas General, who was in charge of keeping an eye on the foreign cultivators, patrolled the mountains and rivers restrictions every time he put on his armor and sword. Occasionally, he would look at those immortals who seemed to be kept in captivity. The man's eyes were very cold. As a Dallas Border Army officer, discussing business with this old nascent soul Tong Yezhou, who was an expert in alchemy. In Dallas Border Army, the law was the most important, and no one could ignore it. Those rules, big and small, were all engraved in the bones of the martial artists. Dallas cavalry and the accompanying cultivators didn't differentiate between the top and bottom of the mountain. They were all martial artists. But since they had finished discussing business, there weren't too many taboos. Before the man left, he suddenly smiled and cupped his fists towards the old cultivator. He said in a deep voice, "Just because you're willing to die in a foreign land, my comrades, and I will remember Heavenly Fault Peak, Azure Tiger Palace. Of course, it doesn't matter whether or not we remember a few brutes on the battlefield. I'm just speaking from the bottom of my heart." The man walked away in large strides, his armor clanking as he left the old man with his back view. Lu Yong couldn't help but cup his fists towards the general's back view. He then put it down and left quickly. Time to do something. In the distance, On the battlefield of Old Dragon City, the senior monk of the large temple was fighting side by side with the unknown Daoist. The old Daoist opened a famous semi-cursive scroll. The content was only 28 words, but there were 172 seals in the future. Each word was talisman. Many golden armored puppets smashed into the demon army. He was a true pure Jade Realm cultivator, but he was unknown in the Aquarius continent. The martial fate of the Aquarius continent didn't lose to the other 7 continents outside of the Central Plains Divine Continent. It was even more prosperous than the pure Jade continent. But in terms of the number of native cultivators in the 5 upper realms, it was too little. As for the old monk, he threw out his staff, which turned into a green flood dragon. He also took off his kasaya, which suddenly became as big as the clouds, covering tens of miles of the battlefield. On the kasaya, there seemed to be a clear and round water surface, like a lotus in the wind. The emperor of the Song clan had once ordered to build temples in the entire continent. The Buddhist sect had to return the favor. Today, when the old monk and the Daoist were resting, they sat on the clouds, a few thousand feet apart, and spoke telepathically. The old monk smiled and asked, "Why did you come here?" "I have nothing to do in the mountains, so I came down to take a look." His place of cultivation was the White Frost dynasty, which was as majestic as the Zhuiying dynasty of yesteryear. Only that when the Dali cavalry passed through the country, the old immortal didn't make a move. Cultivating in the mountains, one's Dao heart was emotionless. But he wasn't a native cultivator of the Aquarius continent. He traveled to the Aquarius continent and stayed there for many years. The old Daoist smiled and said, "Outside the mountains, the grass grows every year. Whether I look at it or not is my problem. Whether I open it or not, it is my problem." Old Dragon City's Fu family's head helper, sword cultivator Chu Yang. Shu Ruo had once asked for his help, and then they met in a foreign land. It made the Mo family ranger feel that he didn't save Chu Yang for nothing. He joined hands with the Sun family's helper. Now that Old Dragon City used the Fu family's mountain river formation as a barrier, 3 huge holes had appeared on the South Sea battlefront. Chu Yang was in charge of stopping the demons from entering. He was exhausted, but he was still killing to his heart's content. With Old Dragon City as the core of the array formation, the Mountain Grand Array was not only responsible for blocking the demons who were constantly sending themselves to their deaths and piling up corpses into mountains, but it could also help Mountain Lord South Mountain Fan Junmaro and some other people who had attained the Dao find demons of the upper 5 realms and earth immortals who could break the array formation's restrictions alone. Dallas' floating sword boat was in charge of fighting the wasteland. Now, south of Old Dragon City in Aquarius continent was wasteland. On the continent, the treasure bottle had a golden lotus flower, which was a huge formation. There was also the 24 solar terms formation which was still flowing perfectly. Kui Dong was in charge of the Beko Keikyung building and was in charge of slaying demons. There was a female sword celestial who came from afar. She kept on killing and attacking with her sword. Her sword in the past was already broken and couldn't be used anymore. The sword in her hand was still a sword that she pulled out from the floating duckweed sword lake's treasury. As for the life-flying sword that was the foundation of a sword celestial, Li Cai was also damaged in the 2 battles in a foreign land and in her hometown. The female sword immortal caught a glimpse of him and suddenly smiled. Because there was a man who appeared and disappeared mysteriously. With a swing of his sword, he killed a nascent soul demon sword cultivator from afar. Then, he fled far away, leaving behind only one sentence: "Tonight, my wife is especially beautiful and moving." Li Cai laughed and replied, "Do I need you to tell me if I'm beautiful or not?" At the southernmost part of Old Dragon City's battlefield, Zhu Mi appeared. Beside him was his direct disciple, Sword Celestial Sheng Chen, and Liu Bai, who rushed over from the Great Wall of Sword Energy. There was also his closed-door disciple, Jiao Shinying, who wasn't a sword cultivator. The young man in the past was now a young man. All the schemes and wisdom in the world belonged to Jiao Sheng. Jiao Shinying frowned and said, "The small Aquarius continent has records of all the strange people in it. Where did those accidents come from? Did I miss the spy report of the 60-year period?" Jiao Shinying shook his head and said, Senior apprentice brother has never missed a spy report. Ju Mi smiled and said, "It's my fault for leaving my hometown for so long. It's also Kui Dong's fault for scheming too much." In the history of the world, there was a sigh that said, all the schemes and wisdom in the world belonged to Jiao Sheng. Therefore, Jiao Shenying said, "Embroidered Tiger Kui Dong is indeed the senior apprentice brother of hidden official." Ju Mi smiled and said, "I don't know how strong he is until he dies." Ju Mi waved his hand. After a while, on the vast and boundless sea surface, the sound of thunder grew louder and shook the earth. It turned out that outside of the sea surface near Old Dragon City, there was another sea surface that was 100 feet tall and surging over. It was a water technique of the king stage great demon Fei Fei, the current lord of the swaying river in the desolate land. She wanted to flood Old Dragon City. On the road to the north, there were many demon race cultivators that were proficient in water techniques, all of them unleashing their natal divine abilities or adding techniques, all of them adding fuel to the flames of the gigantic waves. The monstrous waves ferociously crashed towards the obstructing city at the southern end of Aquarius continent. On the Dragon Ascension stage, GQ's figure transformed into a rainbow light, passing through Old Dragon City's formation and entering the sea. Before she revealed her true dragon body, she had already killed countless of the demon race cultivators in the radius of 10 li. Ju Mi ignored it and laughed to his closed-door disciple, Mu Zun. "Previously, you said that Kui Dong is indeed the senior apprentice brother of hidden official, isn't that inappropriate? It should be that young hidden official is indeed the junior apprentice brother Kui Dong." Ju Mi looked up and spoke in his mind, "Embroidered Tiger thinks so?" The majestic image of Kui Dong was in the sky above Dali Pidu, holding the Beko Kakyung building in his hand. The 12 flying swords were as big as sword boats, hovering in all directions. Kui Dong did not answer the question, and smiled. "Jiao Sheng's schemes are disappointing. Note 1. Don't take it seriously, don't hit the face." 7:17. Left and right, they arrived at a beautiful place with verdant hills and limpid waters. With a green bamboo stick in hand, they climbed the mountain. The temple was at the foot of the mountain, the Taoist temple was at the peak, and the academy was halfway up the mountain. Even if it was not a blessed place, it was still the same. He was now in a foreign land called the Yuhua Blessed Land. He had nothing to do and was unwilling to move his real body. He could only use his yin spirit to travel and take the opportunity to see the world's scenery. This blessed land was a holy place for cultivation and was known as the immortal's abode in the human world. It was a place that all the hermits in the world had to pass by. It was also the first choice of all the kind men and women in the human world. It was said that there were many immortals in the ancient times who cultivated in the mountains. Hence, there was the Kui Song Palace at the peak of the mountain. Later on, there was an immortal who attained Tao and rode a green dragon that was transformed from an ancient pine. He ascended and became an immortal. When the monarch saw the unprecedented and unrecorded auspicious sign, he immediately changed the name of the era. In the first year of Shang he ordered the construction of Baoji Temple to worship the Taoist immortal's ascension. More than 100 years later, the dynasty changed and the temple's incense withered. The immortal's last recorded return to the human world was to use his supreme supernatural power to salvage the Baoji temple that had sunk into the water for unknown reasons and move it to the peak of the mountain. The emperors of the new dynasty quickly gave the ancestor of the treasure accumulation temple many titles, such as Enlightened Being, True Lord, and Heavenly Lord, as he ascended step by step. They also gave him plaques and Tao books, causing the temple to prosper until now. Later generations had different opinions. They were sure that this immortal was not only listed as an immortal after his ascension, but was also given an extremely high-rank green seal by the Heavenly Emperor. His official position was similar to the 6 ministers in the human world. Hence, wherever he went, the gods of the mountains, lakes, and swamps, as well as the hidden immortals of the sea, would come to greet him. Of course, Zhuozhu knew that these rumors about the blessed land were just baseless rumors. The old cultivator who was regarded as a Tao enlightened immortal was actually just a sect in the Tongyi continent. He was a consecrator of the ancestral hall. His final achievement was the bottleneck of the nascent soul realm. He was unable to break through and extend his lifespan, and could only decay day by day. Then, he encountered the invasion of the desolate world. Whether it was because the old cultivator believed that his time was up and there was no meaning in living for a few more years, or because there was some other reason, the old cultivator chose to die in battle on the battlefield of the Tongyi continent. As for feather transformation blessed land, it was unable to escape this calamity and fell into the hands of a military camp. The blessed land was supposed to be carried by a direct disciple of the sect to the Aquarius continent, to hand over this emergence blessed land to Old Dragon City, to help the cultivators of the sect exchange for a place to cultivate with the Dali dynasty. Feather transformation blessed land was vast but sparsely populated. Due to the thin spiritual energy and the fact that the god who owned the blessed land was unwilling to spend too much money, there were very few cultivators who could barely make it in history. To a Tongyi continent's immortal sect, it was indeed a very useless and inferior blessed land. If they spent a lot of money on the blessed land, it would delay the cultivation of the Qi cultivators on their own mountain. In the end, the gains would not make up for the losses. Moreover, a sect leader, even if he was already in the unpolished Jade realm, as long as he could not become an immortal and his lifespan was fixed, he would be short-sighted. He would not dare to say what would happen to the blessed land 1,000 years later. As for the rest of the elders, consecrators, and direct disciples of the ancestral hall, their realms were lower and their Dao skills were shallow. Therefore, they would only be more short-sighted. They might not be unable to see the long-term benefits of the blessed land. However, what benefit would it bring to Dao in the next 1,000 years? However, to the Song clan, it could indeed solve a part of their urgent needs. It was the most convenient to use it to migrate the people of the vassal state in the southernmost part of the continent. Feather transformation blessed land's rank was too low. On the contrary, it was a good thing because the hidden dangers were very small. The conflicts between the people on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, as well as between cultivators and mortals, were almost negligible. It cost almost nothing to settle the refugees. As for why the blessed land eventually fell into the hands of the demon army, Zhuozhuo was not very interested. Regardless of whether it was the greed of the human heart or the accidents of the world, he was detained here anyway. The pilgrims on the road did not pay much attention to this man who looked like a Confucian scholar with a green robe and a green bamboo cane. After all, he was very common. Zhuozhuo stopped at a place where vendors gathered halfway up the mountain. Among them, there was a banner that said, "The last place to drink, quickly drink until you are full." It reminded the people of the world that they had to be sincere in burning incense. Those who were addicted to alcohol should quickly satisfy their cravings here. Otherwise, if they drank when they were high up, they would be drunk. If they were seen by the immortals who had opened their celestial eyes, it would easily cause them to be unhappy and their blessings and wishes would not come true. Other than devout pilgrims who went up the mountain to burn incense, there were also many porters who worked hard to earn money. They either carried luggage for the pilgrims or carried stones up the mountain for the pilgrims so that the temple at the top of the mountain could accumulate stones to build a new mansion. The former made less money while the latter made more money. It was just that this hard-earned money was really hard to earn. Therefore, some pilgrims who were well off would let the porters rest here and treat them to a bowl of wine to strengthen their energy and heart. Zhuozhuo took out some money to buy a bowl of wine. There were more drinkers and they took up a few tables. Zhuozhuo was unwilling to share a table with others and wanted to walk further away. When the vendor saw that the customer wanted to walk further away to drink, he hurriedly shouted and asked him to pay a deposit first. Otherwise, he could not walk too far away to drink. If he encountered a drinker with a bad conscience, after drinking, he would just casually throw him off the cliff. You are saving effort and being generous. Our vendor is just a small business, who can we ask for compensation? Zhuozhuo could only return with the wine and pay the vendor a few coins. Then, he walked to the railing of the cliff and looked at the mountains and rivers in the distance. The mountains and rivers meandered up and down like a scene in a pot. Previously, the official sword-seeker Tongyi sect had taken the initiative to give the sect a great future. No matter what the demon race's intentions were, it was obvious that they wanted to turn the Tongyi sect's disaster into a blessing. After all, The scholar with the pseudonym Ju Mi had appeared. As the second highest sovereign great demon in the wasteland, his vows and promises could indeed be taken seriously. One had to know that in the southernmost part of the Tongyi continent, there was a meeting in the Jade Gui sect's ancestral hall where the sect master was not present. They rejected the suggestion of the round-faced woman in cotton-padded clothes and did not hand over the Cloud Cave blessed land controlled by the Jiang family. As a result, the demon race's army attacked continuously and no longer held back. The temperamental patriarch of the Jade Gui sect cursed Jiang Shangzhen for being a jinx while killing demon cultivators. If one day I die and the Jade Gui sect and Cloud Cave blessed land are lucky enough to survive, let Jiang Shangzhen come to my grave and kowtow to thank me. The sound has to be loud, otherwise no one will hear. This was probably the so-called every dog has its day. It was easy to become a joke if one enjoyed watching a joke. The Jade Gui sect had watched the Tongyi sect become a joke for a few years. It seemed that it was the turn of the Tongyi sect's cultivators to watch the Jade Gui sect become a joke. And this opportunity was easily obtained. All they had to do was nod their heads. As long as the Tongyi sect's ancestral hall seized this opportunity, it was possible that they could directly annex the Jade Gui sect in the future. It was not even an extravagant hope to turn their sworn enemy into a vassal sect. However, the hearts of the Tongyi sect's cultivators were shattered but not shattered. This was because the number of people in the Tongyi sect's ancestral hall who held their own opinions was actually half and half. Zhuozhuo was actually quite surprised. He originally thought that the Tongyi sect's cultivators, regardless of their age, would immediately change sides and expel him from the sect. Unexpectedly, those younger cultivators of the Tongyi sect who were younger in terms of seniority were actually able to bear this burden together. Not only did they refuse the invitation of the wilderness world, they also dared to find Zhuozhuo and say, "We implore Zhuozhuo to stay. Zhuozhuo can leave his life to us." The old cultivators who had lived for hundreds and thousands of years still wanted to live. The young people who had only walked on the Great Tao for a few years were still willing to die. At that moment, Zhuozhuo suddenly felt that the world had indeed changed for the better. In the past, the world rarely made things so easy for Zhuozhuo. For example, in the past, when he encountered those sword immortal embryos who relied on their strength to act, Zhuozhuo would be put in a difficult position. Should he kill them or beat them half to death? As long as Zhuozhuo was still in the Tongyi sect and the sword aura was still in the Tongyi continent, to the wilderness world, it was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. After the sword-shattering Ascendant Realm Zun Yuanjin, Xiao Chuo went to the South Whirlpool continent where the battle was relatively stable. He said that he wanted to strike down the sun and moon that fell from Chen Chuanan's shoulder. At the same time, he wanted to meet Lu Ji. Therefore, the Sword Immortal Advisor was in charge of the specific implementation of the plan. In the end, they used an inferior blessed land with less than 10 million people to successfully detain Zhuozhuo. The advisor seemed to be asking Zhuozhuo, but his real method was to suddenly open the heaven and earth restriction of the Ascension blessed land and fiercely smash it to Zhuozhuo. At the same time, in the blessed land, there was an unpolished Jade Realm demon cultivator who had the will to die. He hooked his finger to Zhuozhuo. The meaning was obvious. Either enter the trap or watch the blessed land shatter in front of Zhuozhuo's eyes. At the same time, Ju Mi used the great method of changing the heaven and earth, causing Zhuozhuo to be in the blessed land. Zhuozhuo did not allow the blessed land to shatter in the Tongyi sect's territory. Other than killing demons, he also used the sword aura to travel the heaven and earth barrier. He used the sword aura to form the heaven and earth formation to protect the blessed land. Without hesitation. Then, Ju Mi restored the original mountains and rivers. The advisor immediately closed the blessed land's restriction and isolated the heaven and earth, causing Zhuozhuo to be temporarily detained here. At the same time, he first rooted the blessed land in the Tongyi continent and merged it with the great Tao of the wilderness world. He also ordered 2 immortal realm demons to continuously use spells to attack the blessed land's barrier. The immortal realm spells and great Tao combined to continuously wear down Zhuozhuo's sword will and cultivation. He did not pursue the result of shattering the blessed land, but also did not allow Zhuozhuo to be too relaxed in the Ascension blessed land. After stabilizing the boundary of the heaven and earth barrier, Zwazwa began to carefully observe this small blessed land. The vast sword aura was still far away from the mortal world. If Zwazwa wanted to leave the blessed land and return to the Tongyi continent of the vast world, it was extremely simple. He could just casually use his sword to split open the heaven barrier and ignore the life and death of the Ascension blessed land. Not to mention Zwazwa, even if Jiang Shangzhen used that willow leaf, he could do the same. Hence, it was meaningless to trap Jiang Shangzhen here. Jiang Shangzhen would definitely use his sword decisively. After using his sword, not to mention the millions of casualties in the blessed land, even if the blessed land was shattered and millions of mortals died, Jiang Shangzhen would not feel the slightest ripple in his heart. In the past, Jiang Shangzhen almost failed miserably in his own family's gutter. He punished the group of arrogant earth immortals who led the group to cause trouble in the Cloud Cave blessed land. The number of casualties on and below the mountain was more than 1 million. However, Zwazwa planned to stay here temporarily until he thought of a solution that was not difficult to solve. This caused the left and right true bodies to be unable to move at all, as if they had entered a meditative state. His meticulous means were not ordinary. Before he let the officials throw out the blessed land, he had already set up an edict of the Great Way in the blessed land. It was as if he was carrying out justice on behalf of the heavens. It was specially used to suppress the sword aura in the human world. Therefore, the yin spirit could only travel far away. Otherwise, a slight move in one part would affect the whole situation. The so-called heaven's way here could not hurt the sword immortal at all, but it would make the human world fall into trouble. For example, when the left and right swords slashed the demons earlier, a huge ravine that was 10,000 miles long appeared in the sky of the blessed land. This was even after the left and right swords tried their best to guide their own sword aura and great Tao to circulate. Otherwise, after killing the demons with a single sword strike, the human world would have suffered countless disasters. In the eyes of the few cultivators who were climbing the mountain in the blessed land, the ravine that seemed to tear a crack in the sky was like a rainbow of sword chi that hung between heaven and earth for a long time. The brilliance of the colored glaze and the sword chi flowed endlessly. The sword aura of the left and right true bodies had to be far away from the human world. It was used to support the boundary between heaven and earth to prevent the demon cultivators' spells and supernatural powers from wantonly breaking the barrier of the blessed land. Otherwise, when the strange phenomenon of heaven and earth happened, the common people of the Yuhua blessed land would suffer from all kinds of natural disasters. It could be torrential rain that lasted for 10 days, causing floods to fill the sky. It could be a drought that lasted for a few years, causing thousands of miles of land to be dyed red, or snow that covered the entire winter and killed everything. In the beginning, the left and right true bodies thought that there were still demons left behind in the blessed land, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. For example, a sovereign great demon was hiding here. However, after patrolling the area, he realized that it was normal. If the two sides fought, once the blessed land was destroyed, causing the mountains and rivers to be destroyed, it was equivalent to letting the left and right true bodies break free from the cage. At that time, it would be his turn to attack with all his might. However, it was not as simple as Jiang Shangzhen taking out the willow leaf and stabbing it here and there. After confirming that there were no more great demons hiding in the Yuhua blessed land, the left and right true bodies began to travel far away. The name of the blessed land was Yuhua blessed land. The meaning of the name was great, but in reality, it did not live up to its name. It was really just a private property of a low-level celestial family in the Tongyi continent. In the past, the cultivators here formed their gold cores and ascended to the Tongyi continent in the sky beyond heaven. After that, on the path of cultivation, they were recruited by the celestial family. Even though the cultivator hid very well, his hometown blessed land was still discovered by the ancestor at the top of the mountain. After a series of deductions, he followed the clues and roughly figured out the location. After spending tens of years, he finally salvaged this small blessed land from the shore of the long river of time. After that, it was only logical that the door would open and the celestial immortals would descend to inspect the blessed land. They would plunder the natural treasures and look for good materials and jade that were suitable for cultivation. However, The blessed land was too barren. The natural treasures that could catch their eyes could be counted with one's fingers. The so-called cultivation geniuses were also lacking. Occasionally, there would be one, but after being brought out of the blessed land and nurtured wholeheartedly, they would not be of much use. At most, they would cultivate to the gold core realm. For a celestial family with the celestial family, even if they had a blessed land, they would not be able to make ends meet. As for the other mountains' celestial masters and disciples of rich and powerful families, they would spend money to travel around the blessed land as celestials. However, due to the quality of the blessed land, the benefits were too small. Therefore, the other celestial families in the Tongyi continent felt that they had made a loss. Over time, Yuhua blessed land had always been a low-level blessed land. The sects in the world were all willing to upgrade a medium-level blessed land to a high-level blessed land. No matter how much money they spent, they would not be tired. However, they might not be willing to upgrade a low-level blessed land to a medium-level blessed land. Therefore, there was a saying on the mountain, "It's better to not have a low-level blessed land." If it fell into the hands of a large sect, they would not care about the cost. In the end, they would gain a lot of long-term benefits and turn their losses into profits. However, in history, there were many small sects that were not rich enough. They would often be harmed by this. In the end, most of them would choose to sell it to the rich sects on the mountain. The quality of a blessed land was not only based on the size of the mountains and rivers and the number of people in the blessed land, but also the amount of spiritual energy in the heaven and earth. Otherwise, even if the blessed land was vast and had a population of tens of millions, it would not be suitable for ordinary people to cultivate on the mountain. The threshold for cultivation was too high and the bottleneck was too big. Therefore, people who cultivated were all in the lower 5 realms. Even the cave realm was an extravagant hope. Perhaps the so-called becoming a celestial was only the first level of the middle 5 realms, the cave realm. Therefore, the quality of the blessed land could only be evaluated as low level. In this Yuhua blessed land, the 36th generation daoist of the Azure Dragon Palace at the peak of the mountain, the first temple master of the treasure accumulation temple, belonged to the category of cultivation genius who gathered the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth. In a low-level blessed land, not only did he cultivate the unprecedented Dragon Gate realm, he even cultivated a golden elixir in the end. Therefore, he was favored by the great Tao of heaven and earth, allowing him to break through the canopy of heaven and earth and travel far away. Unfortunately, the affairs of the world were unpredictable. The cultivators who came from the blessed land were some lucky ones who carried the fate of the heaven and earth. When one person became a celestial, the troubles of the world began. This Yuhua blessed land could be considered a blessing in the misfortune. The blessed land was preserved and had not been destroyed until now. In the vast history of the world, there were many blessed lands that were not taken in by the big sects because of carelessness after someone ascended. They were firmly protected and in the end, the mountains and rivers of the blessed land were destroyed and the people died tragically. There were also many low-level blessed lands that were drained by cultivators and completely cut off the native cultivators' way of climbing the mountain. Of course, low-level blessed lands rose because of one person in the vast world, and there were still many of them. A young lady in gorgeous clothes took advantage of the fact that the elders in her family were resting here. She brought her maid and her mother with the excuse of enjoying the scenery. She came to the side of the green-robed scholar who was drinking alone with a bowl of wine in his hand. She lifted the curtain hat and her face was slightly red. She softly said, "May I ask where you are from?" He turned his head left and right and answered, "A place that I have never heard of." The lady's slightly red cheeks were as red as rouge. She smiled and said, "If you tell me, I will know." He shook his head left and right and said, "Even if I tell you, you still won't know." If it was in the past, he would either turn a deaf ear or just answer a question. However, after meeting and parting with his teacher last time, he felt that his temper really did need to be changed. For example, treating a woman's flirting seriously as a quizzical game. So today, he said 1 or 2 more sentences. The lady did not know why, but she left in anger and embarrassment. The young lady beside the lady was even more annoyed. This scholar was so dull. He was born with a handsome face for nothing. Very well, the quizzical game was over. Clean and efficient, without any sloppiness. He turned his head left and right and returned the empty bowl to the stall owner. The stall owner even muttered a few words of complaint. Drinking a bowl of wine for half a day, if it wasn't a delay in earning money, then what was it? Why would a scholar talk about such empty words? Was he here to burn incense or to cheat a rich woman? I have resentment in my heart, so I only said it in a low voice. You can hear it, but others can't. If a scholar like you doesn't have a big heart, then you're a gentleman. If we really want to fight, do you think I'm afraid of you? If it was a normal scholar, they would just treat it as wind past their ears. They would go up the mountain to burn incense and not cause trouble. However, the scholar stopped and said, "Say it again." The stall owner suddenly felt a burst of anger. He glanced at the other party again. The blue-robed scholar was not short but rather tall. He resentfully averted his gaze, not daring to look at the guy with such a bad temper. He said in a low voice, "It's nothing, it's nothing. Customer, you misheard." Zuozua continued to climb the mountain towards Kuisong Palace. The death of an old Yuanying in a foreign land seemed like a drop in the bucket in the vast world's turbulent general situation. There was no benefit at all. However, Zuozua did not think so. In the past, when the 4 direct disciples of the sage of literature saw such small matters, Kui Dong would investigate the details of people's hearts. Perhaps he would use this opportunity to observe someone or something, wasting several months. The big guy was neither painful nor itchy. It was all the same when bigger things fell on his head. If you want to make me angry, you have to have enough ability. Otherwise, it's all empty talk. Xiaoqi might think more about the local customs and so on. However, Zuozua insisted on competing with people face to face. He would not give up until he had a clear explanation. When Zuozua was young, he suffered a lot because of this. It caused his teacher to have to leave the study room many times. He was distracted and had to deal with the students' problems and clean up their messes. This was especially true after Zuozua went to practice swordsmanship. When he pulled Zuozua to apologize in person, every time the old scholar saw that the stubborn student refused to bow his head, he would get angry. The old scholar would often jump down and give the student a slap. Otherwise, he would not be able to press the student's head down. He would make Zuozua quickly bow his head and apologize to others. However, after each time he reluctantly bowed his head and admitted his mistake, the old scholar would bring Zuozua out of sight. He would first talk to Zuozua about some bigger principles and where the real right and wrong was. The principles involved had long been away from Zuozua and Zuozua. In the end, Zuozua, who had lowered his head in anger, would raise his head higher and higher. If you want to read, read more. Don't just focus on swordsmanship. You will only get into trouble. In the future, if you really understand the sage's books, when you use your sword to pierce through the sky, your teacher will mend the sky for you. But before that, you have to read more. You have to use the Tao of heaven and earth and the sufferings of the human world as the scabbard. Otherwise, how can your teacher rest assured that you will practice swordsmanship without reading? After Zuozua reached the peak, he saw the Kuisong Palace covered with dark green glazed tiles. However, the glazed tiles here were not made of celestial materials. It only symbolized the favor of the emperor of the human world. Zuozua did not go to the Taoist palace with incense burning in spirals. He chose to go to a place with fewer people, which was higher than the halfway point of the mountain. He would only cause his teacher to worry and would not help him share his worries. In this matter, only that silly big guy did the best. Not to mention himself, who caused trouble as if he was eating. Even Xiaoqi was not as good as him. When he was scolded, he did not talk back. When he was beaten, he did not fight back. He always accompanied his teacher and almost never caused trouble. Zuozua looked up. He frowned at first, then his brows relaxed, and he held back his laughter. Someone broke the sky curtain's prohibition with a punch and scattered the sword aura barrier. Therefore, Zuozua thought it was an ascendant realm demon who came here. He was inevitably worried about the safety of the blessed land. When he saw the appearance of the uninvited guest clearly, he was in a good mood. Zwaz slightly leaked a bit of the essence of the sword intent so that the other party could see at a glance. At the same time, he used the sword aura to open the way for the other party to help cover the atmosphere, so that the other party's whereabouts in the Yuhua blessed land would not be too conspicuous. The other party noticed the sword intent on his left and right and immediately restrained his chi. He stood straight and visited the mountain top where Zwaz was. But even so, the mountain top still trembled slightly because the burly man's feet touched the bottom. For a moment, the pilgrims mistakenly thought it was a celestial. Many pilgrims who had already walked out of the gate of Kui Song Palace hurried back to ask for incense. Liu Shilu grinned and said, "It took me a long time to find you." Before coming here, Liu Shilu traveled across continents to Tongyi continent. He first went to the northernmost Tongyi sect. He did not get involved in the matters there and only asked about Zwazwa's whereabouts. Then, he went all the way south. From a sword cultivator named Ju Fei, who claimed to be a consecrator of Luopo Mountain, he found out where Zwazwa was imprisoned in Tongyi continent. Before he opened the gate, he really saw the two celestial demons that could scare people to death. Ju Fei also told Mr. Liu to be careful. Liu Shilu had a good impression of him. Jiang Shangzhen, who killed celestials with a willow leaf in Tongyi continent, was very famous. Now, even the Aquarius continent was talking about the fighting style of the new sect master of Jade Gui sect. It was really amazing and satisfying. At the same time, the reputation of the entire True Realm sect rose in Aquarius continent. The only bad thing about this person in Liu Shiliu's mind was that he was too talkative. Ignoring the fact that he followed Liu Shiliu for thousands of li, he kept on nagging, asking questions that Liu Shiliu could not answer. For example, did he have the chance to be promoted to the head consecrator of Luopo Mountain, and also the child that he helped Mr. Liu raise, and whether or not he was being naughty in the Books Lake? So after Liu Shilu and Jiang Shangzhen separated, he accidentally flicked his finger and destroyed the body of a celestial demon cultivator. The celestial's corpse was dismembered, and the body was like a cicada. His Tao was damaged, and he dropped by a realm. Liu Shilu did not continue to chase after the fleeing demon cultivator, and went back to work. Zwazwa remained silent. Liu Shilu was used to it, and took the initiative to talk about Mr. Liu's recent situation and the situation of Aquarius continent. After listening to Zwazwa, he was still expressionless. Liu Shilu said helplessly, "That's all, I don't know anything more." Zwazwa then said, "Call him senior brother." Blockhead was still not enlightened. Liu Shilu could only call him senior brother Zwa. Senior brother Zwa had the most rules in the sect. Zwazwa then said, "It's been hard on you." Liu Shilu said tentatively, "Let's exchange. I'm in the vast world, killing a few ancient gods from afar is fine, but the rest is not suitable." Zwazwa thought for a while, nodded and said, "Okay." There was no need to be polite with junior brother Jun Qian. Liu Shilu hesitated. Zwazwa frowned and said, "Jun Qian, if you have something to say, say it." Liu Shilu said, "When I went south to the Aquarius continent, I found senior brother. He seemed to know about your situation, so I came this time to let you go directly to the capital of Dali. Of course, if you don't want to, you can continue to stay in the Tongyi continent. But here, at most you can go to the Jade Gui sect, because the Tongyi sect that you were protecting has been severely divided, and the young people of one sect have been imprisoned. The ancestral masters have taken the cultivators and locked them up. But don't worry, the lives of those prisoners are not in danger for now." Zwazwa said, "Then I'll go to the Jade Gui sect." There was no superfluous thought. Liu Shilu sighed. As expected, he could only say the words that eldest senior brother had thought of and told him long ago. "Senior brothers were, you haven't been to Luopo Mountain yet, right? Some people hope that every chair outside Jise Peak's ancestral hall has someone who is really sitting there, or someone who has really sat there before. Then, in the end, everyone will make up a picture scroll together. Our teacher, before leaving, sat in the middle. When I left Luopo Mountain this time, I also moved a chair to a certain position. Of course, whether you go or not, whether there is a real senior brothers were sitting outside the door, the picture scroll can still be completed in the future. After all, The current Luo Po mountain does not lack immortal techniques. Zhuozhuo was silent for a moment, nodded and said, then let's go to Luo Po mountain first, then I will go to Old Dragon City, and see if the Wei and Jin swordsmanship has improved. Boss Sword Immortal once had high hopes for this person. After that, he would go to the Tongyi sect to teach some people what a sword cultivator was. Zhuozhuo was extremely difficult. Just as Liu Shiliu's mouth changed slightly, he realized that Zhuozhuo was looking coldly at him. Liu Shiliu immediately suppressed the corners of his mouth, and used his aura to envelop the heaven and earth barrier. Together with the sword qi around him, he created a second heaven and earth barrier. Then, he took out a picture of the mountains and rivers, and threw it on the ground. As long as he stepped on it, he could shrink the mountains and rivers, and cross 2 continents. Actually, Senior Brother had smiled and told him that it was unusual to let people from afar cross continents by themselves. It was also the first time he, Kui Dong, created a mountain and river. Anyway, even if it did not succeed, he was a great sword immortal, and was not afraid of accidents. However, Liu Shiliu was not stupid, and would not tell Senior Brother Zhuo this. Senior Brother Zhuo and Senior Brother did not get along, and they would really attack each other. If the junior brother complained, the senior brother would suffer. If the senior brother fought, the junior brother would suffer. This was an old tradition of the sage of literature. The first junior brother was Xiao Qi, and the second junior brother was him, Zhun Qian. Especially when there were some unexpected misfortunes, the teacher would console his little junior brother with a righteous aura. Little Qi, this time you were indeed in the wrong. Your senior brother is still in the right for the first time. It doesn't matter. If you really can't take it, just hit Zhun Qian. Remember not to hurt yourself. It won't be nice if it affects your study and writing tomorrow. Zhun Qian, come here. Why are you standing there like a blockhead? Fortunately, this didn't happen often. Every time, the teacher would wink his eyes and Xiao Qi wouldn't hit him. Instead, he would quickly calm down and teach the teacher a lesson, telling him that he shouldn't be so biased towards himself and that he should be biased. The old scholar suddenly realized, and he hit his palm with his fist, and swore that the teacher would change next time. In such a scene, 2 heads would often pop out from the corner to keep watch. The lower ones were Senior Brother's left and right sides, while the taller ones were Senior Brother Kui Shi, who gently rested his left and right sides. Therefore, Liu Shiliu inevitably felt regretful, as if those good things would never come back. That was why Liu Shiliu agreed to let Kui Shi take a trip to Luo Po Mountain, so that the 3 remaining direct disciples of the Sage of Literature's line would be able to regain some beauty in their hearts despite the passage of time and the fact that things remained the same but people had changed. Before Zhuozhuo moved, he said seriously, Zhun Qian, no matter what the reason is, I came here as a guest, and there are some strange phenomena. Previously, when I supported the heaven and earth with sword energy, there are big and small disasters hiding and growing. Sooner or later, they will fall here. Liu Shiliu did not seem to understand. Zhuozhuo said in a low voice, Junior brother Zhun Qian, the guy who liked to put on the airs of a senior brother was at it again. There was no other way, senior brother was senior brother, and junior brother was junior brother. Liu Shiliu sighed and said, I know, I will not only protect the stability of the heaven and earth here, but I will also be responsible for helping you compensate the blessed land. Zhuozhuo gently threw the mountain staff to Liu Shiliu, Zhun Qian, this is for you. Liu Shiliu smiled and caught the ordinary-looking mountain staff. In the past, it was extremely difficult to get extra things from senior brother Zhuo, who was in charge of money. His senior brother could not do it, and neither could his teacher. Then, Zhuozhuo bowed to his junior brother. Liu Shiliu bowed back to his senior brother. Zhuozhuo walked towards the picture scroll, and his true body instantly merged with his yin spirit. The sword immortal and the picture scroll flashed and disappeared at the same time. In this small blessed land, Liu Shiliu did not have as many restrictions as senior brother Zhuozhuo because he did not have the burden of the great Tao to suppress the sword energy. However, Liu Shiliu was not interested in traveling in this world. While dispelling the strange phenomena caused by the migration of his senior brother's true body, he traveled far into the sky with the wind. Finally, he found a lonely mountain and waited there, ready to follow his master's orders and accept a direct disciple. Talent and talent were not the same thing. It was enough to teach him some sage principles, insist on a few words, and the disciple could finally practice it. Therefore, Liu Shiliu was on the top of the lonely mountain, paying attention to a demon of the lower 5 realms who had not completely transformed into a human form. He saw that the little demon stood on 2 feet. On the rough stone table outside the cave, there was a bowl of wonton that came from nowhere. It was cold and mushy. It was using a pair of claws to learn how to use a pair of chopsticks. However, it could not pick up the wonton every time, and the chopsticks would even slip into the bowl. In the end, the little demon was extremely annoyed. It threw the chopsticks into the bowl, raised its claws, and pointed at the bowl and chopsticks on the table. It cursed, "Eat, eat, eat your mother's food. Eat your own wonton." Therefore, Liu Shiliu tried his best to restrain the vast and ancient aura of the great Tao and landed outside the cave. In addition, the mountain demon's vision and realm were too low. It would probably only treat him as a woodcutter who went into the mountain to chop firewood. Liu Shiliu sat on the stone bench, picked up the chopsticks, and ate the wonton. Damn it, it was really disgusting. Was it rancid? Was this half of the apprenticeship ceremony a waste? The little spirit had just returned from its original path and walked out of its cave. It had spent a lot of effort to move a bowl of wonton from the village outside the mountain to the mountain. It couldn't let those feathered beasts in the mountain ruin the wonton. In the end, it suddenly saw the burly woodcutter and got a fright. Was he here to collect his debt? The little demon was really scared. The man was so strong, and he did not look like a person who could talk and negotiate. The immortal spells it had randomly learned were not useful, right? The little monster was furious. "I paid for a bowl of wonton. Not only did I pay you a string of copper coins, I even deliberately threw a few more wild animals in the mountains next to the stove. If I hadn't read those sage books in the cave, I would have been a scholar. Otherwise, I wouldn't have paid you any money. Not only did I rob you of a bowl of wonton, I even robbed you of your big pot of wonton cooking. My goodness, after getting the money, you still have the face to scold me in my house. How dare you? How dare you?" The little demon paced back and forth at the entrance of the cave. "You are indeed a country bumpkin who has never studied. I will not argue with you. I ate a bowl of rancid wonton." Thinking of this, the little demon sighed. It gathered its courage and hid at the side of the cave without showing its head. It deliberately made some noise to scare away the hungry ghost. If it ate too much, it was afraid that there would be a hungry ghost in front of its house. How unlucky it would be. It did not know how to cure people. The books did not teach it this. There were only some patterns in the Taoist books about praying to the sun and the moon to refine the human form. It flipped through the books in confusion and learned some superficial knowledge. It was a self-proclaimed king of whirlwinds, but it could not be taken seriously. It just used it for fun. Liu Shiliu suddenly remembered that it had just come to the blessed land not long ago. It did not know how to speak any official language or understand any dialect. It was a little awkward. Looking at the cave, Liu Shiliu put down his chopsticks and scratched his head. When the little demon saw this, it was so scared that it almost cried. "My goodness, after eating and drinking, you still want to hit me?" It could not help but tremble. Don't hit me, I am not a human." These woodcutters and hunters who liked to go up the mountain were all fierce people. As long as this man did not argue with it today, it would pack up its belongings and move away immediately. Wouldn't it be fine if it moved far away? Liu Shiliu thought of a way. He caught a half-baked cultivator nearby and learned how to speak first. Only then could the 3 of them have a good chat. Good things come in pairs. He had accepted 2 anonymous disciples in one go. As for whether he could take in a disciple or not, whether the other party could become his direct disciple or an anonymous disciple who did not know his master's name, it all depended on the luck of both parties. Liu Shiliu would not take in disciples indiscriminately. There was one thing that the teacher had reminded students many times. They must not always think that taking in a disciple was a kind of charity. Taking in a disciple, whether it was a teacher in the school or a master on the mountain, a preacher in their heart. If they kept throwing knowledge and immortal arts to the people below, The people's hearts would only deteriorate day by day. When the little demon saw the man striding down the mountain, it heaved a sigh of relief. It collected its timid mood, as if it was tidying up the mountains and rivers. It swaggered out of the cave, looking awe-inspiring. It was truly awe-inspiring. The Whirlwind King's glare scared away a burly man. "Move my ass. I still have to hang a plaque with the words Whirlwind King's Mansion in gold when I get back." With such a heroic thought, the little monster still picked up the bowl and chopsticks, and quickly ran into the cave to pack up a package. It carefully put away the few books, and finally, it respectfully knelt down and kowtowed in front of a small grave. It muttered in its heart that it could only come back to visit the immortal master in the future. After kowtowing, the little monster then slipped away. Liu Shiliu actually did not really go far. He had used a camouflage technique and was actually following behind the little demon. In ancient times, Liu Shiliu had actually learned some of the supernatural powers of the gods that pointed directly at the true nature of the human heart. It was just that it was not wrong to take a closer look. As a result, this look made Liu Shiliu happier. It was quite enlightened like him. In the middle of the Aquarius continent, above the sea of clouds above the capital of Dali, Fa Xiong was holding a replica of the Beko Keikyang building, Kui Dong. The real body of this Dali imperial tutor was actually preaching and lecturing to the young scholars of various academies. Among the scholars present, even if there were scholars from Lakeview Academy and Cliff Academy, none of them had received the title of gentleman or sage. A slender figure in a green robe appeared out of thin air at the edge of the sea of clouds. Kui Dong did not look sideways and continued to explain the subtleties of the 100 schools of thought to the young scholars. Many scholars sensed the anomaly, especially some scholars from Lakeview Academy who had cultivated the Great Spirit. Their divine senses were sharper, so most of them immediately turned to look at that person. Zhuo Xiu did not look at Kui Dong, who was still lecturing. He looked at the people who turned to look at him and frowned as he reprimanded, "Did you enter the 72 academies to be immortals?" Zhuo Xiu then turned into a magnificent sword light and went straight to the northern peak of the first continent. The sea of clouds near the Beko Keikyang building was separated by the sword energy and did not close for a long time. Kui Dong only continued lecturing. He did not speak a word to Zhuo Xiu, who was traveling across continents, nor did he stop the young people from being distracted. He allowed them to be spirited, whispering, and guessing the identity of that Zhuo Xiu. Zhuo Xiu finally landed on Luopa Mountain. Chen Nuanshu helped to open the door. Zhuo Xiu first burned incense in the ancestral hall of the Jise Peak. Then, Zhu Mili had already moved the chair outside. It seemed to have placed it in a very particular position. Zhuo Xiu sat on the chair. Zhuo Xiu looked left and right. There seemed to be a teacher sitting in the middle. There was junior brother Zhun Qian, junior brother Qi Jingchun, junior brother Chen Pinggan, senior brother Kui Dong. They were all on Zhuo Xiu's left and right. There seemed to be many direct students and disciples of Luopa Mountain behind them. The lineage of the sage of literature was spreading. It was lively and no longer lonely. Zhuo Xiu straightened his clothes and sat on the chair. He clenched his fists and placed them gently on his knees. He looked forward with a smile on his face. After Zhuo Xiu got up, it was Zhuo Xiu's left and right. After that, it was no longer difficult for him to draw his sword. 718. Zhu Lian sneakily waved his little hoe in Windy City for a few years and finally took away a fox kingdom. When Zhu Lian brought Pei Xiong back to Luopa Mountain, it was just when Zhun Qian left the mountain and entered the mountain. Xu Han, the mayor of Windy City, had just left the ascension platform. Xu Han and Huang He, the sword cultivator of Wind Thunder Garden, were known as the strongest under the upper 5 realms in the Aquarius continent. Now that he had reached the upper 5 realms, even someone as calm as Xu Han could not help but show some pride. He did not return to Windy City, but took a Dali border military ferry at the Oxhorn Mountain Ferry and rushed to the battlefield in Old Dragon City according to the ascension platform. Then, Xu Han received a message from a flying sword. On the ferry, there was a strong murderous aura that spread out like a tide and shrouded the ferry. Because the Aquarius continent cultivator on the ferry had a special identity, a Mohist ranger with a sword behind him quietly left Dallas capital to escort the ferry to the south. When Shu Han could not suppress his upper five realms aura, it caused the entire ferry to tremble. It just happened to pass by the sea of clouds. Where the ferry passed by, the clouds scattered and rolled in all directions. Shu Ruo's expression was calm as usual, one hand behind his back, using the unique by-sword style that he comprehended from the Jiyu Shu sword deity painting. He gently pulled his sword out of the scabbard an inch, and Shu Han's aura was instantly suppressed. The ranger Shu Ruo shook his head at the ferry manager, who used to be a general from the Great Li dynasty, indicating that there was no need to make a fuss. The ferry manager could record the actions of the Lord of the Windy City, but there was no need for them to hold him accountable now. A moment later, Shu Han, who always wore a by armor, appeared at the bow of the ferry. He took the initiative to apologize to the ferry manager and thanked Shu Ruo. Shu Ruo just smiled and said that it was no big deal, it was just a small matter. Shu Han returned to his cabin. It seemed that his Taoist heart could not withstand the ripples. The Dali border military general was from Marshall Mountain, and Marshall Mountain and Wind Snow Temple were the two ancestral courts of the Aquarius Continent's military school, and had the best relationship with the Mohist sect. The armored general softly asked in a voice, "Mr. Shu, to make an upper five-realm cultivator lose his composure, did something big happen in Windy City?" Shu Ruo nodded. "Fox Kingdom. We don't have to worry about that, we have spies there." The foundation of the Clear Breeze City was the Fox Kingdom, and it was all about earning money. Although the city lord Shu Han held a high position, but when it came to matters of romance and spending money, he was as pure as a saint. Of course, Shu Han's wife was a woman who could earn money and enjoy life. Shu Ruo, Shu Ruo's Shu Ruo, Shu Ruo's Shu Ruo, Shu Ruo. After Zhu Lian returned to Luopo Mountain, he immediately pulled Wei Bian, Miu, and Wei Wenlong together to discuss several important matters. Butler Wu Fu, ally Shan Jun, worshipped Sword Immortal, and a Golden Core Chi refinement warrior who was in charge of money and accounting. Different paths of cultivation. They came from different hometowns, but they finally met at Luopa Mountain. Those night banquets were not for nothing. Wei Shan Jun collected a lot of treasures from the immortals. ZZZZ. Let's not drink too much tonight. Wei Pai raised his sleeve again. It looked like he was going to collect the wine. Zhu Lian hurriedly reached out to cover the wine pot in front of him. Drink to liven things up. You can't not drink. Wei Pai smiled and said, "Let's talk business." Wei Wenlong had been carefully sizing up the wine cup and estimating its value in his mind, but when he heard Wei Shanjuan's words, he immediately collected his thoughts. Zhu Lian took a sip of wine and put down the wine cup. He gently twisted the exquisite porcelain cup with 2 fingers. The first thing Zhu Lian asked was when the mountain chieftain would return to the vast realm, and if he could return to his hometown. Zhu Lian was prepared for the worst. He was even prepared to be scolded by Wei Pai. However, Zhu Lian received an extremely good piece of news. It was not exact news, but Miu said that Mr. Liu, who was the senior brother of the hidden official, was rather certain about this matter. He dared not say that his junior brother would definitely be able to return, but there was definitely a chance of survival. There was no such thing as a dead end. If there really was a chance, as his senior brothers, whether it was planning, passing the sword, punching, scheming, or using their fists as swords, they had to win that chance for their junior brother. Zhu Lian said, "The 3 canopy upheavals that occurred above the northern peak territory were truly shocking to witness. Good fist technique, really good fist technique." However, it was not that Zhu Lian did not respect this Jun Qian, but that Zhu Lian's view of fist techniques and martial arts had always been rather strange. In Zhu Lian's opinion, compared to Kui Cheng's fist intent, although Jun Qian also punched to the sky, her fist intent still came from the sky. Therefore, Zhu Lian still respected the martial artist Kui Cheng more. Just like the junior Ding Ying, according to the young master and Zhong Qiu, Ding Ying still felt that the heavens were pressing on his head and heart until his death. Of course, asking the heavens was extremely good and could be said to be domineering. However, Zhu Lian even felt that even if the heavens were standing in front of him, he would be the heavens. Just like Kui Cheng's fist theory, in front of a martial artist, there was no opponent. Otherwise, Even if Ding Ying was in another blessed land of lotus flowers, he would still have an afterlife. At that time, his fist technique would improve by another level. Even if he cultivated an immortal technique to nourish his fist technique, no matter how high his fist intent was, he would still be a puppet. Zhu Lian collected some of his thoughts and began to talk about the second matter. It was the Luo Po Mountain's choice if the mountain chieftain still did not return in the next few years. How should they get along with the Song clan, which was a country and a continent? Regarding this matter, Wei Pai did not say a word. No matter how close the Pailuan Mountain and the Luo Po Mountain were, it was not appropriate for them to speak. Unless the discussion between Zhu Lian and the other two deviated greatly from Wei Pai's mind. However, Zhu Lian did not make any stupid moves. This was how chess was. Zhu Lian's chess skills were quite good, and he was on par with Wei Pai. Although the two of them were slightly inferior to Zheng Dafeng and were not small compared to Kui Dongshan, Zhu Lian did not deliberately pursue immortal hands. On this point, even Zheng Dafeng flattered him. Miu, on the other hand, was guilty. On the Luo Po Mountain, he only cared about eating melon seeds with Xiaomi. At this moment, Great Sword Immortal Mi was a little timid. Fortunately, there was still Wei Wenlong, who did not disappoint Miu. Wei Wenlong and Zhu Lian discussed together and came to a conclusion. They still wanted to split into two. The way to get along with the Song clan should be slightly different from the way to get along with the Dali dynasty. Zhu Lian came up with a plan. All the ferries at the Oxhorn Mountain Ferry did not have to pay a docking fee. The spirit chi consumption of the Oxhorn Mountain Ferry was borne by the Luo Po Mountain alone. Wei Pai said it was still 50-50. Zhu Lian rubbed his hands and looked at Wei Pai with a flattering smile. Just as he was about to speak, Wei Pai resolutely said 50-50, and Pailuan Mountain would not accept even 10% more. Wei Shan Jun of noble character and unquestionable integrity, his two sleeves like the wind blowing over the cloud-covered mountain. Happy events continued to happen in the northern peak, a few small night banquets, selling everything to come up the mountain, drinking a few cups of good wine down the mountain. Zhu Lian thought of some rumors that could be heard even in the distant Qingfeng city, and felt that it was not easy for Wei Shanjun to manage such a large family business, so he no longer haggled. The most miserable were those who snuck into the middle peak with great difficulty to avoid the limelight, but in the end, they just happened to run into Shanjun Jinqing's night banquets. Zhu Lian thought for a while and came up with an idea. Excluding all the costs of Luo Po Mountain's business and all the profits after miscellaneous expenses, everything related to the Dali army and battlefield supplies, even if it was from Luo Po Mountain to all the supplies to the border army, they would give up all the profits. Not only that, Luo Po Mountain also had to work with the Hemp Sect, Spring Dew Garden, Cloud City, Sparrow Manor, and all the allied mountains in the southeast of the North Continent, to fight for an appropriate price. Under the premise that they would not lose money, they would make less money, or even not make any money at all. Wei Pai said, "It's actually more troublesome to return a favor than to borrow and return a favor. I think it's best for Luo Po Mountain to settle this debt by themselves and not involve their business allies. Or, Hemp Sect, Spring Dew Garden, and the other mountains will take the initiative to speak, and we will remember the other party's favor. The reason why I say this is because you haven't been on the mountain all these years. You don't know that the current Luo Po Mountain still has some spare money. Not to mention the income from all aspects, just the trip to Tongyi Continent from Lotus Flower Blessed Land to Jiangshangzhen is not a loss but a profit. Wei Wenlong, report the account to Zhu Lian." Wei Wenlong calculated the account of Lotus Flower Blessed Land. Jiangshangzhen was really good at making money. Wei Wenlong now admired this Luo Po Mountain's honorary master very much. He felt that if they met, they would definitely have a chat. Zhu Lian smiled and said, "You can't blame me. Which mountain's honorary master not only doesn't take money, but also desperately gives money?" Luo Po Mountain's expenditure on the salaries of the members of the Ancestral Hall was really enough to make many sects and immortals beat their chests and stamp their feet in jealousy, because they all liked to subsidize the mountain. Zhu Lian then smiled and asked, "Brother Wei, is our Luo Po Mountain afraid of owing favors?" Does Luo Po Mountain lack business partners? I don't think so. When Luo Po Mountain does business with people, it is for the sake of hundreds and thousands of years of friendship. In my opinion, who owes who a favor, it's hard to say in the future. So in the matter of lowering the price, will you allow me to make the decision for once? Those who are not willing to lower the price, other than the linen sect, can only be decided by the mountain lord himself. As for the others, like the spring dew garden, behind closed doors, let's say something unpleasant, even if the relationship between the two sides is getting further and further apart, so what? Miu finally nodded and said, I know the general situation of the North Continent better. Besides, we didn't let the spring dew garden and the others lose money, we just don't want to earn money. If they are not willing to do this, haha. Wei Pai thought for a while and nodded, it's possible. Then Zhu Lian made another suggestion. Even someone as magnanimous as Miu was a little speechless. Zhu Lian proposed to immediately lend their overturned ink dragon boat to the Dali border army for full use. From the beginning, they had made it clear with the Dali dynasty that even if the boat was destroyed in some battlefield one day, Luo Po Mountain would treat it as if the boat never existed, and the Dali border army would not have to pay for a single piece of snow. Although Wei Wenlong was distressed, he still said, okay. The third matter was the merger of the Lotus Root Blessed Land and the Iron Lock Well, which would implicate the Blessed Land and the Grotto Heaven. Although the well was not really a small Grotto Heaven, after all, no matter how mysterious it was still only one of the shattering mountains and rivers of the Dragon Pearl Grotto Heaven in the past, and the Dragon Pearl Grotto Heaven was only one of the 36 small Grotto Heavens. This matter was proposed by Wei Pai, and Wei Wenlong was responsible for adding details and figures. The Great Sword Immortal Miu was responsible for listening. The 3 golden rains made the Lotus Root Blessed Land full of spiritual energy, and the mountains and rivers were abnormally lush, so much so that everyone in the 4 countries of Nanyuan was surprised. The people at the foot of the mountain were only surprised that there was so much rain in summer this year, but the cultivators and mountain and lake spirits on the mountain were shocked that the heavenly dew was too much. The Lotus Root Blessed Land, which had just become a medium-level blessed land for a few years, was suddenly promoted to the bottleneck of the medium level due to the divine coins earned by Jiang Shangzhen and the 3 heavy rains. It seemed that if one more divine rain coin was thrown, it would be promoted to a superior level blessed land. Once it became a superior level blessed land, there would be all kinds of auspicious signs in the world, and many heavenly materials and earthly treasures would be born. Many cultivators' blessings would appear out of nowhere. At that time, the Lotus Root Blessed Land would usher in a huge profit beyond imagination, and make the Luopa Mountain have a turning point of profit. This was also the reason why the pure gold copper coin was more valuable than the divine rain coin, minor heat coin, and minor snow coin. Not only was it rarer and more difficult to forge, but the pure gold copper coin itself could be transformed into the purest spiritual energy of the world, and at the same time, it contained the aura of the gods. However, when Wei Pai talked about inviting sword immortals to open up the mountains and rivers and break through the passes, Miu's expression suddenly became awkward. Miu had never been so embarrassed when he was ridiculed by young sword cultivators at the Great Wall of Sword Chi as relying on his face to kill the enemies of the upper 5 realms, or the number 1 unpolished jade sword immortal. The coexistence of blessed lands and grotto heavens required the sword immortals to open up the path, and at the same time, they needed to stabilize the world with sword aura. Therefore, the Central Plains Confucian Temple had to invite Bai Yi to open up and stabilize the 5th world. For a sword cultivator of the upper 5 realms, the depth of their sword will, the level of their swordsmanship, and the amount of their spiritual energy were all tests. Although Miu had reached the unpolished Jade realm before, he was actually a ruthless person like Nayland Saihuan and Qi Shou when he was an earth immortal. He could even be considered a senior, and that was why Yin Chen only looked at Miu in a new light. Unfortunately, Yin Chen saw him as a comrade, and Miu was not happy at all. However, after Miu reached the unpolished Jade realm, he suddenly became insignificant in the Great Wall of Sword Chi, and even ranked at the bottom among the sword cultivators of the upper 5 realms. Miu and the traitor sword immortal, Lai Ji, were once brothers in distress. You did not dare to say anything about this matter that involved the great cause of Luopa Mountain. He only felt that it was a pity that Bai Yi was a guest at Luopa Mountain, and Zhu Lian was not there. If you could not do it, then even if the Sage of Dragon Spring Sword sect could be trusted, it would be even more impossible. Therefore, Wei Pai's idea was to invite the Ranger of Mohist, Shu Ruo, to help. You drank a mouthful of wine. After arriving at Luopa Mountain, he seemed to have not accomplished anything. He said softly, "If only the left sword immortal was here." Wei Pai said helplessly, "Mr. Zhuo is now in Tongya continent, and there are strong enemies everywhere. It's impossible for him to appear. Therefore, this matter was temporarily put aside. Anyway, they could first upgrade Lotus Root Blessed Land to a superior Blessed Land. Connecting the Blessed Land and the Grotto Heavens was not an urgent matter. Since it could not be rushed, then there was no need to rush." Zhu Lian drank a mouthful of wine and smacked his lips. Good wine, good wine. Later, he would ask Wei Shanjun for a few more bottles. Then, he sighed sincerely, "It's really our Luopa Mountain's fortune to have Changming on the mountain." Wei Wenlong's eyes were even brighter. He nodded vigorously and said with a smile, "That's true. After Changming came to Luopa Mountain, his fortune was extremely good. From being unable to make ends meet, all of a sudden, he was so rich that I almost forgot how to plan." Wei Pai said, "Next time we have a meeting, we can ask Changming to join us." Zhu Lian suddenly said, "Are you sure you can trust her?" Wei Pai said, "Since there was a secret letter from the Mountain Master, Changming was naturally cautious. He first went to Tongya sect and asked for a token from Mr. Zhuo." Zhu Lian shook his head and said with a smile, "My master is worried that we don't trust Changming, so he killed two birds with one stone." Miu felt that his little world had finally appeared. He hurriedly drank a glass of wine and said in high spirits, "It must be so. Master Hidden Official has always been a meticulous schemer. In the Summer Palace and the Spring Banner House, he is recognized as the person who helped Master Hidden Official to win people's hearts. Which one of them is not an old fox? In the end, each one of them is more convinced than the other. The target of Master Hidden Official's scheme is not just an Ascendant Realm big demon's head that was chopped off at sea." Wei Wenlong lowered his head and drank the wine. Zhenxian could finally speak his mind. It was really not easy. Zhu Lian raised his cup. "Let's drink with Zhenxian. One will be a welcoming feast, and the other will be my young master, the Hidden Official of Sword Immortal You immediately poured a cup of wine and drank first. Then, he poured another cup of wine, but there was only half a cup left. After all, today was a meeting. He was the only one who spoke less, so he could only drink more. Zhu Lian had already raised his cup. He immediately turned his head and complained, "Brother Wei, where is the wine? How can you let Zhenxian drink only half a cup of wine?" Wei Ba glanced at him. "You old chef, are you sure you're good?" So, there were 4 more pots of immortal wine on the table. Zhu Lian said, "Wei Shanjun has the face to ask for the wine, but I have the face to not give it to him." Wei Wenlong suddenly found that the atmosphere of this old chef became familiar when he came to Luopa Mountain. It was just like Spring Banner House in the past. When only he, Yang Ming, and Nayland Saihuan were in the accounting room, the atmosphere was inevitably dull. Even if Miu was there, he would only sit on the threshold and be in a daze. Only when Master Hidden Official appeared in those years, things would be different. In fact, Master Hidden Official never deliberately said anything. He only said natural things and did things that came naturally. Wei Wenlong didn't want to learn from Master Hidden Official because he couldn't learn it. Zhu Lian said slowly, "I'll meet Master Changming first and chat for a while. Then we'll see if we can go together next time." The fourth thing was that Wei Pai took the 3 scrolls out of his sleeve and returned them to Zhu Lian. As for the inside story, Wei Pai wouldn't say much to Wei Wenlong. Whoever owned these 3 paintings would have the Tao and life of Lu Baixiang, Wei Xian, and Sui Yuyu in their paintings. Before Zhu Lian traveled to Qingfeng City, he took the initiative to give these 3 scrolls to Wei Pai. He asked Wei Shanjun to help keep an eye on the scrolls in case someone died and didn't return. Chen Pinggan was willing to trust Zhu Lian. Zhu Lian wouldn't let his young master's trust go to waste. In fact, Wei Pai had a fourth scroll. It was equivalent to Zhu Lian's natal item and also a life-prolonging lamp. As for this scroll, Chen Pinggan had given it to Wei Ba long before he left for the long journey. It was stored in the mountain monarch's residence on the cloud-padding mountain. Furthermore, he had spoken of this matter in front of the two of them at the very beginning. It wasn't that Chen Pinggan didn't trust Zhu Lian, but rules were rules. First, he couldn't explain it to the other three if he treated Zhu Lian this way. The three scrolls were in Zhu Lian's hands because Zhu Lian was the head steward of Luopo Mountain. His status was different from the other three. Zhu Lian's scroll had to be kept in the hands of Mountain Lord Chen Pinggan. On Luopo Mountain, everyone had their own great Tao. It was inevitable that there would be differences between those close to them, but they couldn't go too far. For example, Chen Pinggan was obviously more biased towards Pei Qian, Nuan Shu, and Xiaomi. As for Center Yuanji, Yuan Bao, and Yuan Lai, he was naturally a little distant. However, all the rules, and principles of Luopo Mountain's direct disciples were dead. For example, in the future, when it came to the giving of opportunities, the distribution of heavenly treasures, and the protection of juniors by the elders, everything had to be done according to the mountain rules. Chen Pinggan was on Luopo Mountain, and Chen Pinggan wasn't on the mountain, so it had to be done. The fifth thing was the relocation of Qingfeng City's Fox Nation and where they needed to settle down. Zhu Lian allowed everyone to speak freely. Miu was actually just a bystander who was drinking and listening. He was too lazy to use his brain. Even if he tried to use his brain, it seemed that he couldn't outsmart old Mr. Zhu and Lord Wei Dashan. After thinking about it, he decided not to force himself. It's not my forte. In the future, when the world is peaceful and the world is no longer chaotic, the opening of Luopo Mountain's mirror flower, Water Moon will be the best time for me to show off my skills and make contribution. When the time comes, I'll pull Lord Wei Pai, Consecrator Zhu Fei, and that hidden official's student Kui Dongshan. As long as it didn't involve the grudges between Luopo Mountain and the Song clan, Wei Pai had always been blunt and expressed his own opinion. It wasn't that he was afraid of Qingfeng City or the Pure Jade Realm military cultivator Shu Han, but it was meaningless to argue with Qingfeng City. Otherwise, why not beat the gongs and drums to celebrate the Fox Nation and settle down in a certain mountain under Luopo Mountain, such as Mount Huameng or Mount Huanghu? Was he really afraid that Shu Han would come knocking on his door? What was the point of beating up that city lord Shu who had just ascended to the upper 5 realms for a few days to return home with a bloody nose and a swollen face? Now that the situation was so chaotic, it was one thing to plan in private, but it was not appropriate to have internal strife on the surface. Could it be that they could learn from Xingyang Mountain's sword-seeking Wind Thunder Garden? Zhu Lian rubbed his hands and nodded, deeply agreeing. He said that Lord Wei Shan was far-sighted and had the elegant demeanor of a famous scholar. Miu was a little disappointed, but he couldn't say much, so he could only drink and drink. The old sword immortal of Zhengyang Mountain, who had only reached the Pure Jade Realm after 100 years of seclusion, had already shocked him. Now, there was a city lord with extraordinary killing power in the upper 5 realms. Miu subconsciously took out a handful of melon seeds, and then saw Zhu Lian and Wei Pai looking at him together. Miu was about to retract his sleeves, but he didn't expect to be scolded by Zhu Lian. Lord Wei agreed, so Miu distributed the melon seeds to the other 3. Now, even Wei Wenlong was no exception. In fact, Wei Wenlong didn't have such a hobby in the beginning, but he couldn't stand it. Every time Xiaomi followed Nuanshu to the accounting room to clean up, Xiaomi wouldn't cross the threshold without permission. She would only say one sentence outside the door every time. Shopkeeper Wei, are you tired? Do you want to eat melon seeds? Later, after a few times, Wei Wenlong couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't expect that he would become addicted to it. Since then, every night when it was quiet, he would drink melon seeds with wine, which had a different taste. Previously, when he heard all the details about the Fox Kingdom, there were a few fox spirits of different realms, and there were a few immortal caves of different grades. Wei Wenlong, who had been calculating with his fingers, suddenly stopped and said, according to Lord Hidden Official's style, regarding this matter, he would most likely ask for Pei Xiang's opinion first. If there is a disagreement, the two sides will first explain the reason clearly, and the benefits will be clear before making a decision. Zhu Lian and Wei Pai looked at each other and smiled. Both sides were actually waiting for these words. Wei Wenlong didn't disappoint. If it was a god of fortune who only cared about money, and the world was big, making money was the most important thing, it might be the most suitable on other mountains. But on Luopo Mountain, it wasn't enough. Zhu Lian asked with a smile, God of Fortune Wei, then about the Fox Kingdom's most profitable fox skin talisman, in your opinion, how should we deal with it? Wei Wenlong was a little embarrassed, and hesitated to speak. Zhu Lian smiled, you only need to speak frankly. It doesn't matter if you speak good words, stupid words, or wrong words. What I'm afraid of is that people's hearts can't be seen through their bellies. Over time, they may part ways on the road of people's hearts. Wei Wenlong's forehead was actually sweating. Miu was a little puzzled. Wei Wenlong took a deep breath. Qingfeng City's Shu family is rich but heartless. Of course it's not desirable. But if our Luopo Mountain goes to the other extreme, is it necessarily the best choice? So in my opinion, the source of the fox skin talisman's material can be reduced, but it shouldn't be cut off immediately. It's just to win a benevolent and righteous reputation in front of the Fox Kingdom's Pei Xiong, as well as all the Fox Kingdom's spirits. Once that's the case, people will take a mile after an inch. They will like to use righteousness to suppress our Luopo Mountain. Nascent soul Pei Xiong's position was ultimately the Fox Nation's position. Sooner or later, when everyone was talking about it, it was very likely that Pei Xiong would go from being extremely grateful to being ungrateful to the other extreme. The resentment in her heart is great, and her hatred of our Luopo Mountain is not inferior to that of Qingfeng City at all. After Wei Wenlong finished speaking, he looked a little tired, and whispered, as Mr. Zhu said, these are my heartfelt words, really my heartfelt words. If you blame me for falling for money, Zhu Lian nodded. On Luopo Mountain, they were not afraid of people telling the truth, nor were they afraid of people having selfish motives. Moreover, Wei Wenlong's words were not selfish, and on the contrary, it was extremely good. If a god of fortune who was in charge of flowing water and money did not know the slightest about people's hearts, then Zhu Lian would inevitably worry that one day, Wei Wenlong would go astray. At that time, he might forget one thing, how glorious he was at that time, how high his position on Yiju Mountain was. The fundamental reason was where he was and where he stepped on. Of course, it was related to Wei Wenlong's talent, but it was definitely not just how powerful Wei Wenlong was. To be honest, if I, Zhu Lian, was in charge of money, I might not be as good as you, Wei Wenlong, but the difference was not that big. It's just that Luopo Mountain is the most tolerant of flowers, and young master also sincerely hopes that it will be so. If it's a towering tree of martial arts or sword arts, it will do its best to shelter the people's hearts. If it's a flower that has not yet grown, it will be carefree and grow slowly. Wei Pai was even more gratified. Miu rarely took the initiative to speak. Master Hidden Official doesn't fall for money every day. Is this a bad thing? Wenlong, it seems that your cultivation heart is not enough. Wei Wenlong raised his head, half believing and half doubting. Miu rolled his eyes, imitating the Hidden Official's occasional words in the Summer Palace. Don't you think so? It was rare for Miu to be so serious. My original intention is for the good of others, and at the same time I make money, there is no conflict. The demons of the Fox Kingdom, due to the deliberate atmosphere of Clear Breeze City, have been hostile to each other for a long time. There are constant disputes, and killing each other is a common occurrence. Every year, the old fox's fur will fade. What? Wenlong is an abacus accountant. Are you going to run off to be a moral saint? Since you're not, why should we have a guilty conscience and act coy? Wei Wenlong was after all from Spring Banner House, half a family member of the Summer Palace. Regardless of whether what Miu said was reasonable or not, he had to say a few words of justice for Wei Wenlong. If the old cook Zhu Lian, whom Miu met for the first time, held a grudge because of this, Miu would accept it. Zhu Lian raised a cup of wine. Wenlong, you underestimate our mountain lord's ability to see through people. Drink with me, then punish yourself with another cup. There was a double meaning in his words. Wei Wenlong had underestimated him, and also underestimated Luopa Mountain. Wei Pai was about to raise his sleeve. Wei Wenlong hurriedly said, Wei Shanjun, I still have a lot of wine left. Zhu Lian laughed and scolded, Wei Wenlong, how can you be the god of wealth of Luopa Mountain? You still want to save wine for the great mountain lord of North Mountain? Are you looking down on Wei Shanjuan's cloud-splitting mountain, or North Mountain's night banquet? Wei Bo smiled and said, I'll have to trouble you to let this matter go. Is that okay? Miu nibbled on melon seeds and whispered, our family members agree, but in North Mountain, there are so many immortal masters and mountain spirits eagerly waiting for the next night banquet. They might not agree. Wei Pai raised his hands and gently rubbed his temples. Zhu Lian raised his wine cup again and stood up. He laughed and said, there will be a day when our Luopa Mountain will truly appear in front of the world. Before that, the few of us will work hard and show off our strengths. I believe that in the near future, when the young people in our family grow up one by one, Luopa Mountain will definitely not. At this point, Zhu Lian looked at Miu. Miu stood up and said with a smile, I will definitely not disappoint you. Wei Wenlong also stood up and raised his cup, Luopa Mountain will definitely be rich. Wei Pai finally stood up and said helplessly, let's try not to hold any more night banquets. They drank the wine in their cups together. Then, they all sat down. Only Wei Pai was still standing and looking at Zhu Lian. Zhu Lian asked, are you done chatting? Brother Wei, you can go ahead. As the great mountain lord, you must be busy. I won't go against my conscience and keep Brother Wei. You still did not understand. Wei Wenlong's sharp eyes had already noticed that Zhu Lian had already put the imitation 12-flower god cup into his sleeve. Therefore, Wei Wenlong reached out to hold the wine cup and represented Luopa Mountain. It was difficult for the recluse to deal with people. What was so difficult about the recluse being shameless? Miu realized it late and smiled as he reached out to cover the wine cup, 2 pots of wine each. I've already enjoyed myself to the fullest tonight. I really can't drink anymore. We'll talk about it next time. Wei Pai sighed and put down the wine cup on the table. His figure dissipated and he returned to Cloud Pagoda Mountain. The remaining 3 people laughed heartily. Sui Yuyu had previously gone to Dragon Rider Ali's New Year shop and told the substitute shopkeeper, Sharu, about the situation of Calligraphy Lake and True Realm Sect. As for her cultivation, she only said that she was at the bottleneck of the Golden Core realm. As for Floating Duckweed Sword Lake Sword cultivator Rong Chang, the eldest disciple of female sword immortal Shotsai, she brought her junior sister Sui Jingcheng to Luopa Mountain. The 2 of them had been here once before and were familiar with the place. As for Zhong Qiu and Cao Qinglang, who were heading south, they returned to Luopa Mountain around the same time as Rong Chang and Sui Jingcheng. After passing through the ascension platform and becoming a nascent soul sword cultivator, Kui Wei went to the battlefield of Old Dragon City. Kui Wei did not forget to ask Wei Shanjun for help and used the identity of Cloud Pagoda Mountain's crown prince. Kui Wei was a sword cultivator born and raised in the Great Wall of Sword Qi. However, he was able to become a spy planted by Dallas Imperial tutor. His temperament, aptitude, and of course, his brain were all not bad. Hongxia succeeded in reaching the nascent soul realm. After recovering from her injuries in the water cave of Jade Liquid River, she turned back the way she came. She had to be stubborn and according to the instructions in the secret letter from head butler Zhu Lian, she had to visit the righteous gods of the river and the mountain gods along the way to thank them one by one. Hongxia was not too uncomfortable about this. After all, a nascent soul water dragon might be worshipped like a bodhisattva in other immortal mountains. However, it was fine if it was Luopa Mountain. If it was really so, Hongxia would be frightened and suspect that Luopa Mountain was planning to make her fight with some mortal enemy of the mountain. For example, flooding Clearwind City's Fox Nation or destroying Xingyang Mountain's ancestral mountain. However, Hongxia still received a shock that was neither too big nor too small. The first time she took the initiative to go to Luopa Mountain, she found that Pei Xiong after climbing the mountain path. Both of them were at the same level. As the ruler of the Fox Nation, Pei Xiong definitely had more immortal spells and supernatural powers, as well as more offensive Dharma treasures than Hongxia. However, in terms of combat power, 1.5 Pei Xiong might not be able to win against Hongxia. Especially if they fought close to the water, not only would Pei Xiong lose, but she would also die without a doubt. Therefore, when Pei Xiong really met Hongxia, she was even more shocked than when Hongxia met her. Because at that time, Pei Xiong was taking a walk on the steps and then saw Hongxia and the little water monster climbing the mountain together. The black-clothed little girl still claimed to have learned from Pei Qian and then developed a little by herself. She swaggered. Walking arrogantly makes demons panic. This was nothing. Pei Xiong was already used to it. What was strange was that the nascent soul water dragon, whose water fate was almost as strong as water, was actually walking behind the little girl. Moreover, it was very deliberate. It deliberately walked one step behind the mute lake monster. It was just that the little girl was short and Hongxia was slender, so even if they spoke, it didn't seem too strange. The little girl was completely unaware. She only cared about climbing the mountain and led the way for Sister Hongxia, who was visiting for the first time. Occasionally, she would tell Sister Hongxia that the trees there were planted by the good mountain lord, Pei Qian, and the big white goose in which year. She also said that the flowers and plants were sent by the spring dew garden and that Sister Nuanshu took good care of them. She even said that Sister Nuanshu wasn't very good. She often stopped her from asking Wei Shanjun for bamboo. Sigh, it's not like she didn't want to give her melon seeds. She couldn't possibly not plant a single tree on the mountain, right? Sister Hongxia, you can be the judge. If you can persuade Sister Nuanshu, I'll let Pei Qian record you as a great merit. Pei Xiong could even intuitively feel Hongxia's restraint. It was a kind of reverence that came from walking into a small world. Zhu Lian stood at the fork halfway up the mountain with his hands behind his back. He smiled and welcomed the guest. Hongxia performed the 10,000 palms. Pei Xiong also came to Zhu Lian's side. Zhu Lian nodded at the water dragon. Miss Hongxia, you should be more familiar with Pei Xiong in the future. You should be able to guess that she's the king of Fox Nation. Let's chat for a while. When they arrived at Zhu Lian's door, little Mealy didn't wait for old chef to say anything. She stood at the entrance of the courtyard and acted like a door god. Zhu Lian smiled. Little Mealy, let's chat. Zhu Mealy furrowed her brows and didn't move. She shook her head and said, you guys chat. I don't know anything. I'll just stand here. Zhu Lian called out in all seriousness, right guardian of Luopo Mountain. Zhu Mealy immediately perked up. Yes, yes. In the courtyard, Zhu Mealy sat upright with her arms crossed. She kept a straight face and didn't even shake her feet. Pei Xiong originally thought that Zhu Lian was really just chatting. Unexpectedly, the things Zhu Lian talked about were more important than the previous. First, he told her about Luopo Mountain and the other vassal mountains of the Fox Nation, as well as the recent situation of the Lotus Root Blessed Land. He wanted her to choose the location herself. Then, Zhu Lian asked Pei Xiong to think about it first. He chatted with Hongxia about the construction of the underwater residence at Yellow Lake Mountain and how much immortal money Luopo Mountain could fork out to help her open the residence. From the beginning to the end, although little Mealy didn't say anything, she listened to old chef's words seriously. She didn't pretend to understand when she didn't. After chatting with both sides, Zhu Lian smiled and asked, right guardian, do you have any ideas? Zhu Mealy, who had been motionless, scratched her face. Can I not? Zhu Lian smiled. Sure. Zhu Mealy chuckled. Then no. Her mind was still buzzing. Then, the little girl suddenly felt a little troubled and asked softly, old chef, why didn't you call Sister Nuanshu for such a big matter? If Sister Nuanshu knew, would she be sad? Zhu Lian smiled and explained, Nuanshu's responsibilities are more important. She doesn't need to care about these things. So, you can tell Nuanshu whatever we talked about today. Remember not to deliberately hide it. Zhu Mealy picked up the golden carrying pole and mountain staff on the table. Then I'm going to patrol the mountain. UMI is still waiting. Zhu Lian waved his hand and then chatted with Pei Xiong and Hongxia about the location and opening of the residence. Pei Xiong chose to settle the Fox Nation in Lotus Root Blessed Land. Hongxia was unwilling to pay for Luo Po Mountain, saying that she had some assets. It was just that the craftsman on the mountain who built the residence indeed needed Luo Po Mountain to act as a bridge. Then, Zhu Lian chuckled and said, "Don't spend a single cent of the ancestral hall's money. Miss Hongxia, do you mean to establish your own mountain? Does the underwater residence intend to set up an independent territory and become the king of mountains and rivers? Do you not listen to orders?" When these words came out, Hongxia was so frightened that her face turned pale. Zhu Lian smiled again. "Don't be nervous. It's just a joke. Miss Hongxia is much better than that evil Yunzi whose temperament still needs to be tempered." Hongxia didn't dare to say anything. Zhu Lian waved his hand. "Where money should be spent, Luo Po Mountain won't save money. Hongxia, you haven't been here much and don't know many of the rules. So today, remember one first. A favor is within the rules, that is a favor. You don't even know the rules and you start talking about favors. In the future, if Luo Po Mountain doesn't return the favor in your heart, will you resent us? It doesn't make sense, right?" Hongxia stood up, curtsied, and said seriously, "Hongxia is enlightened and accepts the order." After Hongxia left, Pei Xiong said resentfully, "Yang Fang, are you knocking the mountain to scare the tiger for me to see?" In Qingfeng City, Pei Xiong liked to secretly call him Zhu Lian. At Luo Po Mountain, she began to like to call him Yang Fang. Zhu Lian shook his head and said, "Don't think too much. On Luo Po Mountain, treat people with sincerity and only talk about reason." Zhu Lian thought for a moment and said, "I'll let a jade stage sword immortal accompany you to Lotus Root Blessed Land first. After seeing the blessed land with our own eyes, we'll make a decision on the location." Pei Xiong smiled bitterly. Sure enough, she guessed half of it. She had always guessed that UMI was a nascent soul stage sword immortal, but she never thought that he was a well-deserved great sword immortal. Fortunately, Miu was not here, otherwise he would probably feel that he was being scolded again. After Cao Qinglang returned to Luo Po Mountain, he replaced Xiao Mi Li and became the new gatekeeper. After learning that Pei Qian not only did not return to Luo Po Mountain, but even went from the North Continent to the White Peak Continent, Cao Qinglang did not know what to do for a while. Today, Cao Qinglang went out to the mountain that Luo Po Mountain rented to Pearl Island. He was going to talk to Liu Zhongruan about the overturned ink dragon boat. It was not Zhu Lian who personally went down the mountain, nor was it Shan Jun Wei Pai, but Cao Qinglang. This was knowledge. Zhu Lian went to discuss matters. It was Luo Po Mountain and Pearl Island's official business. Although the dragon boat originally belonged to Luo Po Mountain, it had nothing to do with the island master of Pearl Island or the Princess Royal who held court behind the curtain in the past. But if you want to reason with a woman, you must first talk about feelings. Therefore, Cao Qinglang was the most suitable person to go. Cao Qinglang was the only direct disciple of the current Luo Po Mountain's mountain master Chen Pingan. It was a teacher and student relationship. And Liu Zhongruan was naturally very clear about one thing. Chen Pingan treated his own disciples, Cao Qinglang and Pei Qian, like sons and daughters. Cao Qinglang's relationship with Liu Zhongruan was that of a junior and an elder. Then, Liu Zhongruan, who was originally angry, would be less angry, or even not angry at all. It was equivalent to half of the mountain master Chen Pingan talking to me. Even if there was only half a reason before, in a woman's heart, it would probably become one. Miu accompanied Zhu Mili to finish patrolling the mountain. When Zhu Lian told Miu about the Blessed Land trip, Miu was also interested in the Lotus Root Blessed Land surrounded by clouds and fog, and was happy to accompany Zhu Mili on the trip. Zhu Lian explained some of the things to take note of when traveling to the Blessed Land as a banished immortal, but this time, Zhu Lian would also call that long-lived Daoist friend along. At this moment, they sat together on the steps, watching Cao Qinglang's departing figure, and gave Zhu Lian a thumbs up. "Brother Zhu knows a beauty's heart the best." Zhu Lian grumbled, "Brother Mi, why are you scolding her? How can a martial arts grandmaster praise a fledgling like this? Isn't he insulting her? Miu laughed and said, there's no senior or junior, just people of the same path, learning from each other and forging ahead. Since Miu said so, Zhu Lian didn't argue and laughed as well. My path is not lonely. Wei Wenlong, who rarely came out of the accounting room to take a breather, didn't know what these two were talking about. Wei Wenlong was only worried that Cao Qinglang would be rejected by Liu Zhongruan. Little Meili squatted behind old chef and Umi, frowning hard. She didn't understand at all, so she wrote it down and asked Sister Nuanshu first, then Pei Qian. Zhu Lian was silent for a moment, his expression solemn, and suddenly said, graceful and graceful, stop and dang dang. The mountains and rivers converge fiercely, so full in one's grasp. Miu's talent hadn't diminished in the past, and he blurted out, delicate and tender, swaying and swaying. From the side, it looks like a mountain ridge, from the side, it's hard to control. It was quite a neat match. Zhu Lian turned his head, and so did Miu, and they clapped their hands together. Everything was understood without words. Behind them, little Meili sighed. Fortunately, the good mountain lord wasn't here, or she would feel ashamed again. Wei Wenlong really didn't have the ear to listen to this, so he got up and left. Little Meili coughed. What are you two talking about? I also know how to recite poems, there's also the word stop, do you want to hear it? She borrowed a poem from Liu Yinshuo and said that she would return it after showing it off. Although she wanted to show it off to Pei Qian at first, she felt that she couldn't lose to old chef and Umi now, so she planned to use it to show off to them. Zhu Lian was instantly stunned. He had actually forgotten about the existence of Xiaomi, the messenger god. Thus, he immediately turned to Xiaomi and said with a smile, I don't know how to recite poems. These 2 lines were written by brother Umi. I just suddenly remembered them and was inspired to recite them, so I recited them. Little Meili, do you remember? It was Umi who got the inspiration from eating melon seeds, it has nothing to do with me. Miu was confused. Zhu Lian had already left quickly, not even looking back. Little Meili gave Miu a thumbs up and praised, good literary talent, we can compete in poems in the future. Miu probably didn't know that the right guardian of Luopo Mountain never hid anything from Sister Nuanshu and Pei Qian, and Pei Qian's account book was calculated by book. Moreover, little Meili was often muddle-headed and forgot things. She couldn't remember things that seemed important to outsiders, such as being bullied. However, the little girl remembered things that no one cared about more than anyone else, and she loved to share them with Pei Qian and Sister Nuanshu. For example, Bai Yun, who passed by today, was a little chubby, and yesterday, Lei Gong's snoring was rumbling, more rumbling than last time. In the past, Pei Qian never showed the slightest bit of impatience at home on the mountain. This was probably an important reason why little Meili could always be like this. Luopo Mountain's flying sword sent a message to the shop in Dragon Rider Alley. Fellow Daoist Changming soon arrived at Luopo Mountain quietly. After fellow Daoist Changming, Miu, and Pei Xiong entered the Lotus Root Blessed Land. Zhu Lian stood alone at the edge of the cliff, slightly tired. It wasn't that it was difficult to do things, but that the mountain lord hadn't returned for a long time, which made him feel burdened. Zhu Lian took in Center Yuanji, who was temporarily a registered disciple, and not a direct disciple. Center Yuanji was now at the bottleneck of the 4 realms of martial arts. Outside of Luopo Mountain, he could indeed be considered a martial arts genius. True Realm Sect's sword cultivator, Sui, was on the right. He hadn't taken in a direct disciple, not even a registered disciple. Liu Baixiang was recruited by a mountain of crown princes of Zhongyu as a consecrator, which meant that all forces had a big backer. In Dallas Ministry of Rites, he had half a position as an official. His direct disciples were still only the 2 siblings, Yuan Bao and Yuan Lai. It was said that in that mountain of crown princes, his disciple Yuan Lai, as a martial artist, encountered an immortal opportunity. However, Liu Baixiang didn't mention this in detail in the secret letter. As for the Nanyuan Kingdom's founding emperor, Wei Xian, he followed Liu Xuanmei and Cao Jun and started as a cultivator following the army. Through real battles on the battlefield and on the mountain, he became a real Dali border army general. It should be known that the clean stream status of Dali's civil and military officials was extremely rare, not to mention that Wei Xian also received a peace and quiet token issued by Dali's Ministry of Justice. Of course, it was one of the great blasphemy supervisors, Liu Xuanmei, who helped Wei Xian to get it. Wei Xian originally had enough military merits, but Dali's Ministry of Justice was still in between being issued and not being issued. Then, with Liu Xuanmei's words, not only would it not violate Dali's laws, but it could also sell Liu Xuanmei a favor. Why wouldn't Dali's Ministry of Justice issue it? Cao Qinglang took a trip to the back of the anchovies and brought back a piece of good news. Liu Zhongruan greatly praised Luo Po Mountain's actions. She was even willing to take out the water temple and let Luo Po Mountain help hand over the dragon boat to Dali's border army. However, Cao Qinglang already knew the best and worst possible solutions. According to Elder Zhu's countermeasures, she tactfully rejected Liu Zhongruan's good intentions and also persuaded Island Master Liu not to do so. After Cao Qinglang returned to the mountain this time, she naturally became the gatekeeper. After talking to Zhu Lian, she returned to the foot of the mountain. Master Zhong also practiced his boxing along the mountain path. Today, he purposely waited for Center Yuanji once at the top of the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. He pointed out the subtle flaws in Center Yuanji's boxing. Center Yuanji respected this imperial tutor from Lotus Flower Blessed Land, Master Zhong. He was second only to Elder Zhu, who was half a master to him. He felt that such an elegant and easygoing senior was a true scholar in his heart. Master Zhong returned to his residence and read the sage books at night. This trip, he went from the Aquarius continent to the Great Wall of Sword Chi, then from the Inverted Mountain to the South Po Suo continent, the Central Divine continent, the White Jade continent, the North Lu continent, and back to the Aquarius continent. It was equivalent to walking through half of the vast world. Zhong Qiu gained a lot. Other than dabbling in the philosophy of the various schools of thought in the vast world, he also saw many immortals and heroes outside of the books. Some of them hit it off because of their temperament, knowledge. Some of them sparred on principles or boxing techniques. Of course, there were also dangerous fights that decided victory or defeat, or even life and death. How could Zhong Qiu be a pedantic scholar? As the imperial tutor of Nanyuan Kingdom, he was never a pedantic scholar. Center Yuanji once again stopped at the foot of the mountain. After hesitating for a while, he took the initiative to walk towards the young scholar who was reading under the moonlight. On Luo Po Mountain, Center Yuanji was the most diligent in practicing his boxing. Center Yuanji knew Cao Qinglang was both a disciple of the school of Confucianism and a practitioner of Taoism. She heard that this was why Cao Qinglang had traveled extremely far away with Master Zhong, which was why he had only returned to Luo Po Mountain after so many years. Center Yuanji was rather envious. Her home was not far from Luo Po Mountain. It was located in the provincial city of the Dragon Province. Center Yuanji had yet to truly travel far away. Every time someone watched over the door, from Zheng Dafeng to Yuan Lai to Xiao Mi Li to Cao Qinglang in the end, they would all sit on a stool or a bamboo chair. Afterwards, they would place 2 or 3 spare ones beside them in case they needed them. Of course, there were also melon seeds. Center Yuanji sat on a bamboo chair and remained silent for quite a while. Cao Qinglang, I'm only at the bottleneck of the 4th realm right now. When Yuan Bao sent a letter to the mountain earlier, she said she was already at the 5th realm. You've been to many places. Are there a lot of 4th realm and 5th realm practitioners around my and Yuan Lai's age? Cao Qinglang told her the truth, not a lot. Especially women. However, when I traveled far away with Master Zhong this time, I did indeed see quite a few martial arts geniuses along the way. They've already achieved great success in martial arts at such a young age. Cao Qinglang added with a smile very soon, but my master has always firmly believed that there's a distinction between high and low on the path of martial arts. What you shouldn't be afraid of the most is the situation of learning martial arts first with low achievements. Center Yuanji asked in doubt, why not? If it were me, I'd be worried to death. Cao Qinglang said, actually, I don't really understand it either, but my master was particularly serious back then. He only explained that if you're afraid of yourself, you'll die if you learn martial arts. I'm not a pure martial artist, so I didn't ask too much about it. I just feel like this principle of martial arts can be used in books, so I remember it rather clearly. Senta Yung suddenly began to laugh. She held back her laughter, and her beautiful eyes narrowed into crescents. She still failed to hold it in. Afterwards, she covered her mouth and smiled, as if she had remembered something after hearing what Cao Qinglang had said, which made her feel much better. Unfortunately, Cao Qinglang was the last person she could talk about this matter. She could even talk about it with the bookworm Yuan Lai, but not with Cao Qinglang. Cao Qinglang was a little confused, but when she saw that Senta Yung didn't seem to be as depressed as before, she smiled and continued to read. Before Senta Yung left, she asked, Cao Qinglang, may I ask what realm your master is at in martial arts? Cao Qinglang smiled and shook her head. Miss Senta, of course you can ask. But as my master's student, I can't talk about this. Senta Yung looked at the young Confucian's clear eyes and wasn't annoyed. Instead, she nodded with a smile, cupped her hands, and left. Cao Qinglang thought of her hometown for no reason. She thought of the ancestral house in the shabby alley, the school, the bustling Zhuangyuan alley, the entire capital city of the Nanyuan kingdom, and the foreigner who was also a banished immortal like her master from the lotus flower-blessed land, Mr. Lu. Her master and Mr. Zhong were of course Cao Qinglang's great benefactors. In fact, Cao Qinglang also cared about Mr. Lu a lot. Later, when she traveled to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, she learned from her master that Mr. Lu was actually the leader of the Yin-Yang school and the descendant of the Lu family. She met her master on the ferry on Osmanthus Island, and then met him on the inverted mountain. It was a great friendship that made her master give her a grain of grain rain money. In the end, by chance, they took another ferry across the continent, the treasure-swallowing whale, and traveled to Tongya continent. Not only did they fight side by side, but they also went through life and death together. They became best friends who didn't talk about money. Zhong Shanfeng, Xu Yuanxia, Lu Tai, Zhong Kuei, Liu Jinglong. These people were all close friends that her master regarded as his peers. Among them, Ranger Xu Yuanxia could be considered half an elder. As for Liu Xianyang, who came from the same hometown, he was slightly different from them. Her master never denied that he would treat Liu Xianyang as his elder brother and the slug from the Mud Bottle Alley as his younger brother. They were all his family. Lu Tai was actually the person who took care of her the most together with Mr. Zhong after her master left the lotus flower-blessed land. Without their guidance, she might still have to grit her teeth and endure day by day, but it would definitely be more difficult. However, Mr. Lu, who was unparalleled in elegance, followed one of the lotus flower-blessed land to Qingming Tian. Cao Qinglang didn't know if she would have the chance to reunite with Mr. Lu in this lifetime. At that time, her master was chatting with Cao Qinglang in the pavilion on Dragon Slayer Cliff. While drinking, he joked that when he looked back, Lu Tai carried a body of magic weapons and endless immortal methods. He did indeed have the demeanor of a direct descendant of the Lu family. However, his realm was too low. Many young talents who were born in the immortal families of the central region increased their realms like drinking water. For example, in the North Continent, she met a cultivation genius named Huai Qian. Therefore, when she met Lu Tai in the future, she must make fun of him. Why? Just because he was afraid of heights, he was also afraid of the increase of his cultivation realm? In fact, her master rarely talked about people behind their backs. However, when he mentioned it to students or disciples, he was often talking about friends. The stories he told were all past events that made him smile and not worry about drinking. In the end, Cao Qinglang only said from the bottom of her heart that if she didn't know that Mr. Lu was a heroic man, she would have mistaken Mr. Lu for a woman in disguise. She didn't know why, but her master looked a little strange at that time. He even reached out and pressed Cao Qinglang's head, scolding her, "You're thinking about this at such a young age. When you return to Luopa Mountain, don't hang out with Zhu Lian and Zhang Dafeng. If I find out that you dare to peek at those immortal books, I will go to Mount Biyun to chop bamboo and help you make a ruler." Cao Qinglang rarely couldn't continue reading, but tonight was an exception. She simply closed the book and began to rest. For some reason, Cao Qinglang always felt that her master was about to return home. Miu and the other two had already returned from Lotus Flower Blessed Land. Everything went smoothly. Pei Xiong chose a piece of land with good feng shui on the border of Songlai country. It was secluded and occupied a potential dragon vein. Therefore, Pei Xiong, who was pleasantly surprised, promised the Fox country an extra 800 grains of grain rain money as the first settlement fee. However, the grain rain money was in the hands of Luopa Mountain's bookkeeper, so it must be put into Lotus Flower Blessed Land. Especially the place she chose, it occupied at least 50% of the Riki transformed by the immortal money. Pei Xiong now had a rough understanding of Luopa Mountain's customs and business network. She really couldn't be too pretentious and reserved. She really had to treat people with sincerity. She was shameless. Therefore, after returning to Luopa Mountain, Wei Wenlong and Pei Xiong settled the accounts in the bookkeeper's office. Pei Xiong was no stranger to asking for a sky-high price and asking for money on the ground. Instead, she felt at ease. In the end, both sides were happy. Pei Xiong's Fox country was promoted to 1,000 grains of grain rain money. Only 30% of the Riki could be divided. Otherwise, it would greatly affect the changes of Lotus Flower Blessed Land's landscape. When this matter was mentioned, Wei Wenlong, who had been discussing business properly, used rare harsh words. He said that if the Blessed Land was in chaos because of money, and it caused the 4 countries in the world, the country's destiny to be unstable, the Mountain Master would not let anyone off. Pei Xiong, Wei Wenlong, and even Zhu Lian would be held accountable. No one could escape. Pei Xiong had actually gotten the result she wanted, so she naturally had no objections. In fact, she even planned to spend 1,000 grains of grain rain money and only take 20% of the Riki. The reason why Pei Xiong was willing to spend 1,000 grains of grain rain money, other than the double meaning of surrender and visiting gift, Pei Xiong was not stupid. She could see that it was easy for a Lotus Root Blessed Land to be promoted from a middle-grade Blessed Land to a high-grade Blessed Land. The Fox country was rooted here and benefited a lot. They could benefit from this favor for thousands of years. Longevity Fellow Daoist privately visited head steward Zhu Lian. After a round of polite greetings, when they talked about the true value of the Fox country, both of them were silent at first. Then, they said in unison, literary luck. On this day, Zhong Qiu went to drink with Zhu Lian. The old chef made a few dishes to accompany the wine. There was no need to hide their words. Since they were from the same hometown, they were also like-minded people. Therefore, before Zhong Qiu left, he stood up and bowed to Zhu Lian to thank him. Zhu Lian calmly accepted this big gift. After all, he was the one who moved the Fox country to Luopo Mountain with his own strength. Who would be happy to see the Lotus Flower Blessed Land's literary luck increase by 40 to 50% or 70 to 80%? Of course, it would be Zhong Qiu, who was the imperial tutor of a country but cared about the people of the world. When Zhu Lian stood up to send him off, he only said, "I can't let Zhong Qiu regret coming to Luopo Mountain." Zhong Qiu shook his head. "Even if I die, I have no regrets." Zhu Lian slapped Zhong Qiu's back and scolded jokingly, "What are you saying?" Zhong Qiu laughed and left. The old man was very unhappy. Zhu Lian felt that this Zhong Qiu could be a true sage in this vast world. Every time Miu took a break, he liked to sit at the top of the stairs quietly and alone for a while. That way, he would be less troubled. As for sitting at the stone table by the cliff and eating melon seeds with Xiaomi every day, that was for the sake of happiness. Miu would also be very happy when he met the little warm tree who seemed to be busy all the time on the road. The hidden official once vowed in the Summer Palace that Miu and his Luopo Mountain were born to be compatible with each other and that he should visit more often in the future if he had the chance. Then, the young hidden official squinted his eyes and smiled. His thumb and index finger gently rubbed together, indicating to the leader of the Summer Palace that every time Great Sword Immortal Mi visited Luopo Mountain, he should not forget his sincerity. Miu smiled and said, "Hidden official, oh hidden official, the reason why you didn't want me to become a consecrator of Luopo Mountain back then, was it because you coveted the gifts of visiting again and again?" Zhu Lian slowly walked to Miu's side and sat down. He handed over a bottle of glutinous rice wine produced by the Dong family shop. Luo Po Mountain would receive a lot of it every year. Miu opened the wine bottle and took a sip. The taste was soft, but the aftertaste was the best. Miu smiled and said, "No wonder Luo Po Mountain has such a culture." From Wei Wenlong being like a fish in water, to him following the local customs, to tonight when he saw and heard Cao Qinglang and Center Yuanji chatting casually. Zhu Lian drank a big mouthful of wine and wiped his mouth. He nodded and said, "A mountain lord, a different style." Even without talking about Luo Po Mountain, Miu knew that young sword immortal from the North Continent, Tai Hui Sword Sect's sect leader Qi Jinglong, who was his master's best friend. Rumor had it that this person was stopped by the Patriarch of Discipline, Huang Tong, who did not allow him to go to the battlefield of the Aquarius Continent's Old Dragon City. He used the reason that the Tai Hui Sword sect leader could not die, but he really could not die for the time being. At the same time, the sword immortal Huang Tong himself rushed to the battlefield of another continent. Qi Jinglong did not stay in the Patriarch's Hall or the Pianran Peak to cultivate. Instead, he led his own Earth Immortal sword cultivators and left the sect with their swords. He first joined forces with a few large sects that had good relations with the Tai Hui Sword sect for generations. Then, with many like-minded cultivators, he went to the chaotic places on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. If he could not reason with them, he would not be merciful. He would not let any signs of internal strife in the North Continent. He would prevent those wandering and hidden demon cultivators from fanning the flames and causing a disaster. Like friends. It was fine to say this about his own mountain lord Chen Pinggan or Liu Jinglong. Miu regained some of his unrivaled flirtatious nature and said softly, "That Sui Jingcheng Lady Sui?" That Sui Jingcheng was really good to Nuan Shu and Mi Li. She really treated them like her own daughter. Not only did she use different methods to give them gifts, but she also carefully selected each one. She was even willing to spend a lot of time on the two little girls and did not feel awkward at all. Sui Jingcheng's appearance caused Nuan Shu and Mi Li to laugh a lot these days. Even Mi Li secretly asked Mi and old chef for help. They helped Lady Sui find dozens of reasons to not go down the mountain tomorrow from senior brother Rong Chang. What other reason could there be for a pure and unmarried girl to do this? Zhu Lian chuckled. There's no need to say it out loud. Zhu Lian finished his wine and said slowly, "A real man talks about right and wrong, regardless of the pros and cons. A real hero talks about good and bad, regardless of success or failure. Sages talk about all ages, regardless of one's lifetime." Miu nodded and then shook his head. Not all reclusive officials were like that. Zhu Lian smiled, "Of course, young master is the only one." Then, one day, the sword immortal came to Luo Po Mountain. Miu was used to being lazy in Luo Po Mountain. Occasionally, he would feel guilty when talking about serious matters. But when he saw the sword immortal, the senior brother of the reclusive official, Miu felt so guilty that he wanted to dig a hole and hide in it. He hid outside the mountain and went to find his good brother Liu Xianyang to drink. In the end, there was the scene at the square outside Jise Peak's ancestral hall. The sword immortal's disciple, left and right, first offered incense to the teacher, then sat on the chair outside the door. Other than Chen Nuan Shu who opened the door and Zhu Mi Li who helped move the chair, only Zhu Lian was watching from afar. Cao Qinglang had just accompanied Zhong Qiu to the state capital and was on the way. After left and right got up, Zhu Mi Li ran all the way and helped Mr. Zhuo move the chair back to the ancestral hall. Left and right said he would do it himself, but Zhu Mi Li did not agree. Left and right could only give up. If Miu or Pei Xiong were here, their eyeballs would probably pop out. When Zhu Mi Li returned, Chen Yuan Shu closed the door again. Left and right laughed, "You're Zhu Mi Li, the mute lake monster that my junior brother mentioned?" Zhu Mi Li could not help but open her mouth wide. She quickly handed the golden carrying pole and mountain walking stick to Sister Nuan Shu for safekeeping, then covered her mouth. Finally, she covered her mouth with her hand and laughed, "Good senior brother of the mountain lord, you're a sword immortal that's bigger than a table." "How do you know me?" Left and right laughed. What do you mean by bigger than a table? Ju Mi Li explained, it means that you can place many big white bowls. The size of melon seeds is average. The opening of the bowl is very big. Oh. If the table is big, then it's the biggest. Left and right nodded, you can say that. Ju Mi Li was so happy that she ran on the spot. She learned this from Pei Qian, and Pei Qian learned it from Sister Baoping. This was the martial arts inheritance of the Jianghu. Left and right reached out to rub Nuan Shu's head and said softly, Junior brother often talks about you when he's at the Great Wall of Sword Qi. He's always worried that you'll be bullied by a guy called Chen Lingjun. If there is, as your Mountain Lord's senior brother, I can remind Chen Lingjun. Ju Mi Li quickly said, Chen Lingjun went to the North Continent to walk the river. He didn't bully Sister Nuan Shu. Sword immortal on the table, please don't scold him. Chen Nuan Shu bowed and said, Mr. Zhuo, Chen Lingjun is very good. He won't bully anyone. Left and right nodded, and directly asked Zhu Lian, who was walking over with cupped fists, now on Luopo Mountain, is there anything you can't cross, is there anything I can help with? After Zhu Lian retracted his fist, he said, there is one thing that I need Mr. Zhuo's help with. Left and right were surprised, oh? Which blind immortal from the Aquarius continent? Even the smooth and slick Zhu Lian was speechless for a moment. This was the first time he was chatting like this. Zhu Lian then talked about the matter of connecting the Lotus Root Blessed Land and the ancient Well's broken Grotto Heaven to form a Grotto Heaven Blessed Land connection. In the vast world, there were only two places that could accomplish such a feat. One was Zhu Lian's hometown. In the past, the Blessed Land was connected to the Tao ancestors' Lotus Grotto Heaven. After listening to left and right, he said, small matter. It was not easy to come to Luopo Mountain, and in the end, it was just to do this. It seemed that Left Sword Immortal was somewhat disappointed. On the way to Luopo Mountain's bamboo building, left and right walked slowly. He carefully asked Zhu Lian about the situation of the Lotus Root Blessed Land. After roughly understanding, he said that he could ask Chang Mingdao friend for some divine path knowledge, and ask Master Zhongqiu about the current situation of his hometown. If Mr. Zhu did not find it troublesome, he could even ask about the guest of the Blessed Land. As for how to use the sword in the end, there was no need to ask anyone. Zhu Lian agreed one by one, and said it would take at most 4 hours. Left and right arrived outside the bamboo building, and called Cao Qinglang, who had just returned to the mountain. They sat at the edge of the cliff, and asked some questions. Left and right said, when it comes to learning, you have to be more attentive than your teacher. He is just too smart, and his attitude towards learning is not as good as yours. Cao Qinglang did not know whether to nod or shake his head, and did not know how to answer. Left and right asked, Pei Qian is still not back from his trip. Cao Qinglang nodded and said, the last message he sent back to Luopo Mountain was from Lei Gong Temple of the Snow Mountain Continent, at the home of Pei Xiong, a martial artist of the 10 realms. Left and right frowned slightly. Pei Qian sent the letter personally. How could he be so careless when he is alone outside at such a young age? Don't learn from your teacher. Cao Qinglang shook his head and said, it was Snow Mountain Continent's Sword Immortal Senior, Xie Songhua, who helped him. Pei Qian is very cautious when he walks the Jianghu. Left and right nodded and smiled, that's not bad. Left and right looked at junior brother, he did not find him pleasing to the eye. Then he looked at the disciples and students that junior brother took in, they were pleasing to the eye. Left and right said, you are a disciple of the Confucian school, and also a person who cultivates the Tao. Martial uncle does not like to interfere. But there is one thing that you can remember first. You were in the right, but you met an unreasonable immortal on the mountain. The other party bullied you because of their higher realm. Saying your teacher's name might not be useful now, so you should say martial uncle's name. From now on, the lineage of the sage of literature's lineage no longer needed to be hidden from the world. Cao Qinglang nodded and said, I will remember. Left and right suddenly asked, do you know how to drink? Cao Qinglang blushed and said, this trip, I drank, but I don't like to drink. Left and right laughed, very good. Don't learn from your teacher and become an alcoholic. Learn from martial uncle. Cao Qinglang asked, I still have some questions in my studies. Martial uncle is busy. Left and right said, there are many things in the world that cannot be studied. Just ask. In the end, left and right stayed at Luopo Mountain for a short 2 days. The heavenly paradises were connected. Left and right retracted his sword chi, and went down the mountain to travel 1,000 miles away. When he passed by the center of the Aquarius continent, left and right heard a voice, and told him a simple principle, which made left and right frown. The sage of literature's lineage already has a disciple, then among martial uncle, can there be someone who can fight, and is known by the world? So that the old farts in the future will not dare to bully them? This was the principle that Kui Dong held the Beko Keikyung building in his hand and told left and right. So in the end, left and right turned his sword, and did not go south to Old Dragon City, but crossed the sea and went straight to the Po-Suo continent. Xiao Chuo was about to ask Chen Chunan, who could carry the sun and moon on his shoulders, to ask a continent. Between heaven and earth. The sword light arrived. Xiao Chuo was struck into the air by the sword, tilting a little, and instantly crashed into the bottom of the sea. The sword light split the sea, and then pierced through Xiao Chuo and the mountain range under the sea. Xiao Chuo asked me a punch, from behind. Left and right returned a sword to you, bright and powerful. Even if you don't want to, you have to. If you are not in the savage desolate world, you might not be able to take it. Once the heavenly paradises were formed, the burden on Zhu Lian's shoulders lightened. It was as if everything was smoothed out, and the only thing left was for young master to return home. Just as Zhu Lian's mood turned for the better, he did not think that something bad would happen. Damn it, people should not get carried away. A few days after one lady Sui left, another lady Sui came. Zhu Lian saw a strange scene in a scroll painting on the desk, and cursed at the prodigal woman, and threw in a grain rain money. Luckily, she was the least valuable, and only needed one. Also, she was not a pure martial artist, which was the good thing. After dying once and walking out of the painting, her Dao foundation was not harmed. After Sui Yuyu walked out of the painting, her killing intent was extremely heavy. Obviously, she killed many demons in the Old Dragon City battlefield, so much so that her body and Dao disappeared. Sui Yoyo's killing method was not like Zhu Lian and Wei Yixian, but more like Lu Baixiang. Therefore, she was definitely not courting death, but the battle was really fierce, and she was in a place where she would definitely die. Zhu Lian still cursed, of all people to learn from, you learned from your master, who likes to fight without caring about his life. So arrogant, so amazing, a scholar from the lotus flower-blessed land, you really think you are the scholarly sage of the world? What happened in the end? I don't care if it ended well or not, but as a direct disciple, you don't know? Sui Yoyo's eyes instantly turned cold, her killing intent rising. Zhu Lian glared. What, did I say something wrong? Or am I right? This prodigal woman still dares to scare me. How many divine coins have you earned in the Jade Gui sect and True Realm sect? You can't even compare to Lu Baixiang and Wei Yixian. Although this woman's killing intent was heavy, her killing intent was not deep, and she still had some conscience. Otherwise, Zhu Lian was really afraid that he would not be able to control himself and beat her back into the painting. A sword cultivator at the bottleneck of the Golden Core realm, how amazing do you think you are? Outsiders can't tell why you went to the Ascension platform and why you can't break through to the nascent soul realm, but I know it clearly. Others don't know why you, Sui Yuyu, want to ascend, but when I was in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land, I, Zhu Lian, flipped through all the unofficial histories and secret records of the pugilistic world, and I know why you insisted on ascending with your sword. You're just helping your damn master achieve his wish. Zhu Lian also knew why Sui Yuyu treated his young master differently. It was that Daoist Temple's master, God, who purposely changed Sui Yoyo's memories, making Chen Pinggan and her master look similar. Sui Yuyu naturally knew about this, but because she could not let go of one and was unwilling to let go of the other, she pretended that this did not happen. Sui Yuyu was in the Lotus Flower Blessed Land. When you were alive, even if you made all the heroes in the world bow down to you with your sword, do you dare to say to the world that you like your master? As for the 4 people in the painting, including you, who hasn't been tampered with by that stinky old Daoist? The old Daoist temple master was resourceful and cunning, so the four of them could only accept it. Wei Xian treated little Pei Qian as his own daughter. Lu Baixiang was obsessed with chess, so when he came to the vast world, he was determined to become the lord of White Emperor City who played the iridescent cloud manual with Kui Dong, to become a true giant of the devil Dao. I, Zhu Lian, am also pitiful and pitiful. You don't know if I'm real or fake, so you're just going around in circles with me. Sui Yuyu did not want to argue with Zhu Lian, but said, I want to go to Old Dragon City again. Zhu Lian said, how many lives do you have left, so you can do whatever you want? When you died in the Blessed Land, you could still come to this painting. If you die again, who will help you collect your body? Sui Yuyu said angrily, who are you to control me? Among the four of us, you're the one who likes to cause trouble the most. Zhu Lian said with a cheeky smile, my young master can't control you. He'll feel bad about Jiuyu's money. I'm warning you, my young master has never made a loss in serious business. Don't make an exception because of you. However, Sui Yuyu, this silly woman, said something knowledgeable. Sui Yuyu prepared to fly away on his sword. Zhu Lian said coldly, he'll feel bad about his money and regret it. Sui Yuyu snorted and walked away, but he did not fly down the mountain. Her residence was on Luo Po Mountain. Zhu Lian clicked his tongue. In the small town of Huaihuang County. Today, after the shop in Dragon Rider Alley closed for the day, the longevity Daoist did not return to her residence. Instead, she picked up the few remaining pastries and looked at the substitute shopkeeper, Sharu, who was behind the counter doing the accounting. Sharu raised her head. These days, this longevity Daoist, who called herself Ling Chun, always looked at her with a smile. Actually, both sides knew each other well. Why did this longevity Daoist sister, who had not been recorded in Luo Po Mountain's register, have such a strange look in her eyes? Before this, the longevity Daoist sister had seen her secret collection of rouge and face powder. The longevity Daoist sister even told Sharu why she changed her name to Ling Chun. It was because if there was a tree of Ling Chun and a few branches of Osmanthus in the immortal lord's house on the mountain, it would be a good thing. Compared to the common saying of good people don't live long, Ling Chun sounded better. However, in the future, the ancestral hall would still use the name longevity. After all, the common saying was not pleasant to hear. However, what in the world was better than good people live long? Sharu glanced outside the door. No one passed by. Finally, she could not help but ask in her heart, what's going on, Daoist sister? There was one good thing about communicating in her heart. Sharu could recover her female voice. Wearing a snow-white robe and casting a camouflage spell, in the eyes of the common people and the cultivators of the lower 5 realms, Changming was actually an ordinary-looking woman, who looked like she was 20 years old. Changming picked up a piece of pastry and reached out to cover her mouth. After eating it, she wiped the corner of her mouth with her thumb and asked in her heart with a smile, Sharu, you were first refined by that old immortal Liu Li into a female ghost skeleton wearing colorful clothes. Later, you followed the master of the mountain and benefited from the disaster. Moreover, you have been wearing this immortal's remains for too many years, so have you forgotten many habits of the past? I'm talking about some small habits you have since you were young, the kind that is very inconspicuous, such as, for example, when you were young, you would bite your fingers when you were nervous. For example, when you were not afraid of the hot summer, you would find it difficult to endure the cold. For example, you would naturally like to play ancient music. These were all found by Changming after she received Old Yang's hint and went to Luo Po Mountain to look through the secret records. It was not difficult to find. In the territory of Jiyu Shu, the decline of incense had something to do with the third chief of Bek Okekyung building. And these characteristics that Changming thought of happened to be a certain kind of natural Taoist seed. She opened her apertures very early but did not really cultivate Taoism. However, Changming did not ask. She just looked at Sharu with a smile. Sharu said pitifully, for example what? Daoist sister Changming, please don't scare me. She really did not deliberately hide anything. In fact, at this point, there was nothing worth hiding. Besides, with Kui Dongshan here, What did Sharu dare to hide? She was really used to the peaceful days in the Riding Dragon Alley. Every night, she could shed her skin for a moment and return to her female appearance. After all, the female ghost was also a female. Moreover, she had once again devoted herself to cultivation, accumulating bit by bit, steadily increasing her realm. She was carefree. Anyway, no one would talk about her realm. Sharu really did not have any distracting thoughts. Just like this, the peaceful days were similar to those of the previous days, which made Sharu exceptionally satisfied. As for the secret orthodoxy that had been exposed by Kui Dongshan, Sharu really did not want to say anything more. Why should she talk about this with Daoist sister Changming? Anyway, Kui Dongshan knew about it. Was it not the same as knowing half of Luopo Mountain? Was it not? Could it be that he did not even know about the Hill Master? Back then, because of the ballad in her hometown, Kui Dongshan's brain was filled with many ancient almanacs. He actually knew the root of her orthodoxy at once. He called her the remnant of a country that perished 600 years ago, the ashes of a side branch of Taoism, and said that he knew the unique secret method of the ancestor of resurgence of her lineage. He also said that he wanted to completely erase a little bit of her Taoist aura. To be honest, at that time, Sharu was really scared to death. As for now, you can do whatever you want. Anyway, I'm just a temporary shopkeeper of the New Year shop. Every day, I help Luopo Mountain, help you, Kui Dongshan's husband, earn some hard-earned money. Every night, I cultivate diligently. What else do you want me to do? If you really annoy me, I'll go and complain to your husband. I don't care if you are Kui Dongshan or some big white goose. Daoist Changming stared at Sharu. After a moment, she smiled and said, I see. This Kui Dongshan is really interesting. Secretly doing good things, without leaving a name. If he isn't the direct disciple of the Mountain Master and is a completely trustworthy person, then it's really worrying. Changming smiled and said, it seems that I've misunderstood you. I won't say anything about Sister Sharu not taking it to heart. However, you can take it to heart, but it's best that I don't find out that you take it to heart. Otherwise, it'll make things difficult for me. Sharu's lips trembled. She was afraid and aggrieved. She said timidly, Sister Changming, don't scare me. It wasn't easy to have a close friend. Why did it suddenly become like this? Changming sighed. I'll help you write a letter. First, I'll ask for Immortal Master Kui's opinion. If it's feasible, we'll catch a big fish. If it's not suitable to act rashly and alert the enemy, we'll put it aside for the time being. At this point, Changming stretched out a finger. A golden light suddenly pressed between Sharu's eyebrows. Changming smiled and asked, Third Chief, what do you think? Sharu fainted on the spot. Her whole body was surrounded by 7 colors. Outside the door, a head popped out first. After looking around for a while, a young man in white strode over the threshold. He clapped his hands lightly and said with a bright smile, Sister Changming, you have good thoughts, good skills, and good courage. My master is the most virtuous person to meet. Changming frowned and said, since both sides already know, may I ask Immortal Master Kui why you've been observing Sect Master Lu from afar until now? Kui Dongshan leaned on the counter and craned his neck to look at Sharu who was lying behind the counter. With his back facing Sharu, he snapped his fingers and Sharu actually jumped up high before falling heavily onto the ground. He smiled and said, don't worry, there's one good thing about Sect Leader Lu. When it comes to big matters, he's always willing to accept his losses. As for small matters, he really disdains to scheme. At most, when he's bored, he'll occasionally take a look at the scenery of Riding Dragon Alley. Every time he executes the ability of Mountain View and River View, he'll cross 2 worlds. Although he doesn't see much, he expends a lot. This in itself is a kind of gift to Sharu. Kui Dongshan leaned on the counter with his feet off the ground. He turned his head and smiled. What's more, Sister Changming probably doesn't know. Once Sect Master Lu is bored, I'll have a lot to talk about. On Miss Sharu, every time I reach a higher level, I'll add a secret restriction that has never been heard of before. Other than some old bastard, unless Lu Chen comes here to observe Sharu, he won't notice anything. In short, I know everything that Sect Master Lu has seen. Some of the things that he has seen are things that I deliberately want him to know. Maybe I'm saying it like this, but Sister Changming, you must believe in my master's judgment in selecting student. Kui Dongshan turned his body and floated to the ground. He faced Changming and said with a smile, I swear to heaven and earth. Changming shook her head and said, even if Sect Master Lu is trapped in a scheme, he'll still be able to predict your scheme after a few times. Kui Dongshan nodded vigorously, and then, after all, we're separated by a whole world. Even if his real body came here, he was suppressed to the Ascendant realm back then. Plus, he's just a master of mountains and rivers, so he should be in the immortal realm. If he calculates with me again, can he beat me? Kui Dongshan shook his head vigorously, I really can't. Only then did Changming nod his head lightly. However, he said, I will tell Master about this matter in full detail. Kui Dongshan bowed and said, with teacher's help, half of the burden on my shoulders has been lifted. Changming was a little helpless. Changming suddenly asked, did you predict that I would test Sharu today? Kui Dongshan raised his hands. His snow-white sleeves were too big. They covered his face and were blown away. He put down one hand and patted his chest vigorously. I swear to heaven and earth, it's all based on luck. Changming was silent. Kui Dongshan pointed to his head and said with emotion, it's not all about luck. After all, you're not Li Huai. How can I ignore you in Luopo Mountain? Don't blame Wei Pai for tipping me off. Except for Wei Shanjun, you didn't find all the spies I placed here in the town, so I'm just scheming against you. Speaking of this, the young man in white began to shake his head and said carelessly, I won't say anything like Sister Changming, please don't mind me. But you can mind, but you'd better not let me find out that you mind, or you'll make things difficult for me. Changming couldn't help laughing. But she was more relieved. An unpolished jade stage cultivator was actually able to completely conceal himself and stay by his side. No wonder he dared to say that he was scheming against Lu Chen. Kui Dongshan jumped backward and landed behind the counter. He put his feet together and stepped on Sharu's face. He shook her a few times and shouted, wake up. As a female ghost, I can tolerate it if you sleep during the day and don't earn money. But it's late at night, why don't you come out and scare people? Changming stretched out her fingers and rubbed her eyebrows. This Kui Dongshan, was he also a scoundrel in front of her master? Kui Dongshan squatted down. Soon there was the sound of a slap. Then it should be the sound of Sharu waking up and bumping into the counter in fright. It seemed that Sharu, this young man in white, was really scared to the bone. Finally, Kui Dongshan stood on a small stool and wiped the counter with his sleeve. Sharu stood not far away. She lowered her eyes and didn't say a word. Kui Dongshan turned sideways and scolded, is my husband unwilling to see you, so he didn't return home? Not a human, not a ghost, not a man, not a woman, not a man, not a woman. If it was me, I would also lose my appetite. I won't see you if I can. Changming frowned and said, I advise you not to say this kind of words. I'm sure that if Chen Pingan was here, he wouldn't let you say such word. Calling Chen Pingan's name directly was the first time Changming had done this in Luopa Mountain. It could be seen that she was angry. Changming had already prepared for the worst-case scenario of becoming enemies with Kui Dongshan. Unexpectedly, the young man in white stopped talking and sighed. He bent his knees slightly and leaned on the table, only revealing his head. As long as Mr. can be here, let alone being scolded by Mr., I can even be beaten 100 times. Changming smiled and said, he will be back. Kui Dongshan waved his sleeves on the counter and wailed. Kui Dongshan suddenly stopped and asked, left and right, did you leave the mountain? Changming nodded. Kui Dongshan walked down the small stool and went around the counter. He swaggered and said, this uncle is too much. You came without saying goodbye and left without saying goodbye. The next time we meet, I'll jump up and punch you in the head. Looking at the young man in white who swaggered out of the shop, Changming frowned more and more. It was normal for a cultivator to be sick in the head, but it was rare for someone to be so sick. Kui Dongshan suddenly poked his head out of the door. Sister Changming, will you be the patriarch of Luopa Mountain in the future? Changming smiled and said, you don't have the final say. Kui Dongshan said, You don't know, but Sir is the most partial to me. Pei Qian Qinglang and the others added together are not as good as me. Changming smiled and said, please go away. Kui Dongshan said, then I'll really go away. Changming stretched out a hand. Kui Dongshan laughed and left. He turned sideways in the dragon-riding alley, his big sleeves fluttering, which was very beautiful. He went away as he said. He came to Luopa Mountain because Kui Dongshan didn't go through the gate, but climbed up. Therefore, Xiaomi, who was eating melon seeds, was shocked. Looking at the head on the cliff, the little girl was stunned for a long time. Ju Meili ran over, squatted down, and looked down. Big white goose, where's Pei Qian? Why didn't he go home with you? Don't you often play together? Kui Dongshan climbed up the cliff. Ju Meili also stood up and handed a handful of melon seeds to the big white goose. Then she laughed and said, I'm not bragging, but I was just shocked when I saw you just now. Kui Dongshan said with a smile, Xiaomi, you've grown taller. Ju Meili stood on her heels and laughed. Kui Dongshan rubbed Xiaomi's head and looked into the distance. Suddenly, he jumped up and shouted at the top of his voice, the vast world, listen to me. Today, I scared Xiaomi a little. When Sir goes home, he must scare the whole world. Damn it, plus the savage world and the green world. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.